Hey, Tony.
Okay. So it's 6:33, so I call this meeting of the Jersey City Historic Preservation Commission to order.
Okay. Please be advised that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice of the time, date, and place of this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jersey City Historic Preservation Commission has been sent to the Jersey Journal, the Jersey City Reporter, and Ella Specialito on September 30th. Same notice has been sent to the city clerk for posting on the bulletin board outside the clerk's office in City Hall and on the Jersey City website. I have proof of this notice here in evidence, which we can mark as B1. Okay, move on to a roll call of commissioners. Commissioner Gucciardo.
Here.
Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
Commissioner Sakong is absent. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Here.
Commissioner Tagliareni is absent. Commissioner Gordon.
Present.
Commissioner Gunther.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Gibson is absent. Commissioner Peppin.
Here.
Vice Chair Sandkamp.
Here.
And Chairman Blazak.
Here.
Okay, there are 8 members of the commission in attendance. 5 affirmative votes are needed for a certificate of appropriateness. Moving on the agenda, first item is the approval of minutes from September 13th. Anyone have any questions or comments or anything on the minutes?
No.
Okay, seeing none, staff would recommend a motion be made to approve the minutes.
Motion to
and
approve.
Second.
I heard John, so we're doing that. And I'll do a roll call vote because not everyone was present for that meeting. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Yes. Aye. Aye.
It's okay. Commissioner Lewis.
I wasn't present.
Okay, so abstain or did you read them?
Abstain.
Cool. Okay, Commissioner Gucciardo.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Peppin.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Gordon.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Gunther.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Sandkamp.
Aye.
And Chairman Blazak.
Aye.
Okay, there are 6 votes in favor, none against, and 2 abstentions. The minutes are approved. In terms of correspondence, all application materials are linked on tonight's agenda and available on the data portal. In terms of staff announcements, we do have an announcement this time. So I'm sure everyone saw the email, but we do have a new commissioner joining us. This is Commissioner Gunther, Janelle Gunther. We're very happy to have you. You were previously sworn in, so we're all good there?
Yes, we're all good.
All right, cool. Again, very happy to have you. Sorry it had to be over Zoom, but you know, doing the best. All right, let's move on to open public comment. There are any members of the public in attendance who would like to speak tonight regarding matters of historic preservation that are not on tonight's agenda, please use the raise hand function on the bottom of your screen. If you are on the phone, you can press *9 to do so, and we'll permit you to address the commission. Okay, staff sees no hands raised and recommends a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion to open and close.
Second, Sandkamp.
Okay, I have Stephen and then I have Tony. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have no old business on tonight's agenda, so we can move on to new business. Brian, if you'd like to take it away.
Okay, this is item 9A, case H21-098. This is Stephen Joseph Esquire on behalf of Eric Liepins, architect, at 75 Montgomery Street, block 14301, lot 7 in the Paulus Hook Historic District. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of a blade sign at a primary facade, exterior ventilation system at the rear, new aluminum storefront system at 75 Montgomery Street, an altered contributing neoclassical building designed by John T. Rowland, constructed between 1909 and 1919.
Nick, I promoted both you and Eric. Does anyone else need to be promoted?
No, that's all.
Cool. So prior to you introducing the application, Nick, Eric, we're going to swear you in.
Okay, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Well done.
And then just spell your name for the record for Tony Ann, please.
Sure. First name is Eric, E-R-I-K. Last name is Liepins, L-I-E-P-I-N-S.
And the last little administrative thing, Nick, Eric has never been qualified in front of this board before, correct?
I'm not sure, Eric, have you testified before this board before?
I have not.
Okay,
So,
didn't think so.
Eric, are you a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Is your license current?
Yes.
Have you appeared before boards like this in the past?
Yes.
All right. And you're obviously familiar with the plans and the both the architecturals and the signage plans?
That's correct.
I would just ask the board accept his qualifications.
Staff would recommend that he be qualified as an expert in the field of architecture.
All right. Acceptable. Very good. Okay. If there's no other business, I'll jump right in.
Go for it.
Okay, great. So Nicholas Tremi appearing on behalf of the applicant. The applicant this evening is Yum and Chill's Restaurant Group. They're also being represented this evening by Eric, who's our architect and we've just brought on. Just to give the board a little bit of orientation, I mean, this building is highly visible, sort of famous in Jersey City. It's 75 Montgomery. It sits right on the corner of Montgomery and Warren Street, or Washington Street, rather. So right on the corner of Montgomery and Washington, kind of across from the post office there. This evening, the application is really kind of in three parts. So the first part is going to be the signage requirements. The applicant is a restaurant group. One of the restaurants in the group is Taco Bell, and that's what's being proposed at this particular site. So the signage that you'll see does have that logo on it. It's going to be a blade sign coming off the front of the building, and our architect will bring us through that a little bit. Sort of the second part of our application is going to be the window replacement. Architect will bring us through that. It's not going to sort of materially change the look of the facade, but we'll take you through what's going to be proposed there. And sort of the third part of the application is the venting. The venting is going to go up the rear of the building. There's already in there for a different system, but our architect will take us through that as well. I think without further ado, we can ask Eric to share his screen if that's all right.
You should be able to.
Through these various pieces of the application. So just to give the board a little bit of context, really the space that we're talking about is going to be to the right of the entrance. And actually you can see it right up there on the screen. Prior to this proposed use, it was a Blimpie restaurant. So the sub restaurant, that restaurant's now gone. And our applicant is proposing the Taco Bell. Eric, could you take us through?
Sure. Thank you, Nick.
You got it.
So we'll start with, as Nick said, the first item here is the signage. So I'll just stay on this facade render for now. This is part of the application and the drawings that were submitted to the board. So we are proposing this blade sign in between two of the window bays. The design of this is it's a externally illuminated blade sign that's 8 square feet, and it's mounted to the facade with 2 standoffs. The blade sign is smaller than the one that was observed in the historical photographs due to the current zoning ordinance. The lighting illuminates the signage from the top. It's LED strip lighting that shines down to illuminate the Bell and Taco Bell lettering. The other element of this signage is on the left-hand side here. That's a 3M vinyl window graphic that's adhered directly to the glazing. That sign totals 13.6 square feet and is non-illuminated. For the storefront replacement, we're proposing a clear anodized aluminum storefront system manufactured by Conair or similar. The frame profile is 2 inches thick by 4.5 inches deep, which is consistent with the existing system that's installed. The current windows are single pane, therefore not energy efficient, nor do they meet current code. So the replacement will bring us up to current energy code. And the new system maintains the aesthetic of the existing storefront, as well as the aesthetic of the rest of the commercial space at this building on the first floor. And then I will shift over to, we had prepared a rear elevation of the building, and this will take us to the exhaust part of our application. So the proposed venting is out the rear of the building, which then runs up to the main roof.
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't, if you changed anything on the screen, we cannot see it.
Okay.
You might have to, sometimes you have to, it depends on how you share your screen. Sometimes you share the whole screen. Sometimes you only share the window. It's kind of annoying. There we go.
That worked. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I'll just start again on this. So this is the south rear elevation of the building. So our exhaust comes out through the rear of our tenant space, and it will run up the rear of the building to the main roof. This is needed in order for the future tenant to operate with their kitchen exhaust. And this is also very similar to the existing grease exhaust duct for the adjacent restaurant tenant. It will be 16 gauge steel that's welded and painted a black color as noted in our drawings. And that concludes the 3 elements of our proposal.
Yeah, Eric, just one question on the venting. Would that be visible from the street or any public right of way?
No, it will not be.
Okay. Okay.
And Eric, when you were going through the signage and the storefront, it was, I don't know if you were trying to click through screens then or show us different slides then, but we were kind of stuck on a portion of the storefront that showed the signage. So I don't know if you have any sections of the proposed storefront or anything that you could show us perhaps.
Sure.
Yeah, we were just seeing that last slide. Now we can't see anything.
How about now?
Yes, we were on the last slide and we could just see part of that. I think it was A2 was all we could see previously.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, we see A2 now.
Perfect. So the top elevation is the existing elevation. The bottom elevation is the proposed elevation, which shows the vinyl graphic plus the blade sign where it would be located. On the upper right, we do have a dimensioned detail of the vinyl graphic. And then the lower right-hand side is a section of the storefront. I'm not sure if I zoom in here, does the page adjust or no?
Yeah, it's
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. So here is a section showing the bottom of the sign is 14 foot 6 inches from the sidewalk, which is consistent from what we can gather from the historic photograph.
And do you have the historic photograph as part of the set that you could show us?
I do. I might have to stop again. So where you do see Western Union, I'll zoom in a bit here. Where you see Western Union, that was a mast arm sign fastened to the facade in the same location between the same 2 window bays that we're proposing our blade sign. From our estimations, based on this photo, it appears this sign is about 8 feet in projection off of the building, and about 40 square feet where we're proposing an 8 square foot sign.
Now, Eric, do all Taco Bells have signs like this, or is this just an attempt to recreate the historical nature of the building?
There are Taco Bells that have blade signs. And not all of them do, but some of them do, yes.
Is, this is Commissioner Gucciardo, the electric that's getting to the sign, is it wired through one of the supports? Or is it external to the sign?
No, it's wired through one of the supports. I'll show you here another drawing. So here's an installation drawing from the sign fabricator. So it will run through one of the standoff arms is where the electric will be ran through. So it will not be visible.
And it looks like you were working on a specific distance off the sidewalk. But from my point of view, it doesn't necessarily secure it to the building at an advantageous point based on the pattern on the face of the building. Is it possible, of course, with the rest of the commission's okay, to maybe make that an adjustment in its placement in relationship to the pattern on the front of the building?
To ensure that we are faceting into a mortar joint?
Certainly that's always desirable, so that less of the material is damaged. But if you have a drawing of how it's attached now with the pattern on the building, if you could get to that, that might be helpful.
I don't have an exact drawing with the pattern of the building, but we can definitely ensure that we are mounting it in a proper location.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Peppin again. Are there neighboring businesses either in the block or in a couple blocks that have signs like this attached to their buildings that you know of, Eric?
I'm not sure how close the next business is that has a blade sign.
I have another question of Commissioner Gucciardo. In the image that you showed first, it looked like the windows above the storefront are dark black, brown, or something dark. And I believe you're proposing a light colored aluminum frame for your windows. In my mind, the fenestration on the outside of the building should be consistent. Would you consider making it the same color as the rest of the building?
The rest of the first floor is the clear anodized color, so we are consistent with the street level.
So it's like an aluminum metal color now. Is that right?
Correct.
I
Correct.
see. And
Almost
so,
like a silver.
so there are other windows on the facade that are not part of your building that will remain? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. We only have one portion of the building, yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. This is the picture I was talking about, Eric, where the sign mounting to the building, maybe, based on what you've drawn as the pattern on the front, might not be in the ideal position.
We can look into that, and if we have to adjust, we can certainly do so.
Okay.
Stephen, would you have them adjust the sign up or down just for staff notes?
Well, if the sign can be designed where it looks like you have mortar joints, and it could go up, it even go up a little bit to catch both of those mortar joints, that would probably be ideal.
Got it. Thank you.
And to answer Commissioner Peppin's question, I don't think there's any blade signs on this block of Montgomery Street. I know there is at Buddy Who's around the corner at Washington and York Street. That's the only other one that I know of, kind of right around this particular block itself.
Thank you.
And I had one question about the storefront. Is there any idea what the historic material of the storefront was? Was this actually a commercial space historically, or what was the ground floor historically at this location?
So from the report issued, it says the property's most significant use was when the main floor was operated as a Garden State National Bank. And since then, it's been a variety of commercial uses. Most recently being a Blimpie restaurant.
Thank you.
Eric, would you mind
that,
showing us the photograph to the
huge-
left? Oh, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Sure. This is the existing. This is the current photograph.
Do any other commissioners have any questions about any of the project components?
I have a question about the exhaust system in the rear.
Sure.
It appears to cross in front of two windows. And I'm questioning why it's not going up right next to the current ventilation system for the other restaurant that's there.
Sure. Yeah.
So it appears to cross the two lower windows.
Mhm.
And why would it not, is there a reason why it's just not next to the current system that's there?
Sure. So up on the main roof, there are obstructions at the very top of where that duct would terminate.
Okay,
So where we're proposing it, it gets further away from those obstructions, and there is no obstruction at the top.
okay. All right, that was my question. What type of obstructions are we talking? Because obviously they're not interfering with the current system that's there.
The current system, my recollection, turns and goes further into the roof, onto the roof. But I believe it was cell phone antenna equipment.
Okay.
Any other commissioner questions?
We maybe open it up to public
Oh,
comment.
yeah, hold on,
Sorry.
Stephen.
Sorry,
Yeah,
are those residential windows, as Paul asked about the crossing in front of the windows? Are those residences that they're crossing in front of?
No, the upper floors are commercial offices.
Commercial also? Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I know it can't be seen from here, but it is some distance off of the actual windows. They're just pulled away.
Okay.
all right. Brian, were you satisfied with this and I just trying to finish your thought before this to go to public?
Yeah, I think maybe you can open this up to public comment unless there's any other questions. So if you are a member of the public as an attendee and wish to testify on this, you can either utilize the raise hand function or dial, what is it on the star nine? Star nine. And Maggie will promote you to a panelist and you will have 3 minutes to testify. So if you could do that in the next few seconds.
Okay. All right, staff sees no hands raised. So therefore I recommend a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion, thank you.
Second, Blazak.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Maggie, if
All
I
right.
could add one thing.
sure.
We did just look into the blade signs in the adjacent neighborhood. And the next block towards Exchange Place, there are 2 additional restaurant uses with blade signs.
Okay. 1 block towards Exchange Place?
Yes, 1 block towards.
Okay. All right. Does that conclude your testimony, Nick and Eric?
Yeah, it does. The only thing I would add is that there's no planning or zoning required, just the certificate of appropriateness here. The use itself is permitted. And
Great.
that does conclude.
Thanks. Okay.
I'm sorry. There's somebody on
Yeah.
the comment saying their hand was raised.
Yeah, I see that. All right, Diane, I did not see that. It didn't pop up on my end. But Brian, do you feel comfortable reopening public so Diane could address the
Yeah,
question?
that's fine. We can do that.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion to reopen public comment?
I'll make a
Motion,
motion.
Stankham.
Second.
So Stankham?
Okay.
Stankham.
I have,
Second.
yeah. And then Commissioner Lewis for the second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, Diane, I am promoting you now. There we go. All right, Diane, can you hear us? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we just need to swear you in quick.
Okay. Hold on.
Liz?
Okay. Can you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Just state and spell your name for the record, please, Diane.
It's Diane, D-I-A-N-E. Last name is Case, K-A-E-S-E.
All right. Thanks so much. Take it away.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. One, I just wanted to clarify that the horizontal bands that you see in the photographs and on the drawings are actually recesses where the mortar joint is. They're not necessarily mortar joints. They're, a good couple of inches high. So trying to get that sign attached in there could be a bit of a challenge. That's 1. 2, what is being planned for the transoms? Are they going to be clear glass? And what is behind there? Is that something that we do or don't want to see? And 3, I think if you look really, really clearly at the historic photo and you had it blown up really well, I'm not sure that that sign, the Western Union sign, was mounted on the pier. It looks like it was mounted in the center of that bay of windows. So I would love to take a closer look at that and have the commissioners take a closer look at that. From my end, I would much rather see a flat sign attached to the pier of the building than to see a blade sign that projects out. I'm not sure who the intended recipient of that advertising is. And I think that mostly you're going to end up with street traffic there, not anything more than that. So you're going to be much more effective having something at street level where people can see it rather than off the side of the building.
I'll start with your first one with the horizontal bands. They are about 1.5 inches in height. So I believe we would be able to mount to those with no issue there. As far as the transom, it is intended to be clear glass. On the far right bay, there will be a soffit that's set back from the window glazing, but the other 2 bays are completely open all the way back to about 15 feet or so. And for the Western Union sign, I'd have to review that again here. But I believe it was mounted from both the pier, and then it had an arm that was like a brace arm up to the 2nd floor that was on a diagonal.
I don't know if you're trying to share your screen but maybe you could do that and show us that.
Sure.
Eric.
Sure. So from this diagonal, which runs up to the second floor, was the bracing to the sign that lands right in between the two windows there.
It looks like it's not between the
Yeah.
two windows. It looks like the upper brace is connected to the window sill portion of the window, the way I see it. Because I don't see that in between the two windows. You don't see that metal connecting anywhere.
Yeah, and may even attach to the infill that was in between in that window bay.
I would encourage not attaching to that pier at that location. It's going to do a significant amount of damage to have electrical and everything else through that column, so.
Mm. Well, that's also unusual. We don't often do electrified signs either. At least I haven't approved. I can't even recall the last electrified sign that we've approved, but.
Well, we do sometimes allow for the, like
External illumination.
external illumination. This is more of an integral
Right.
LED light that's kind of integral to the signage, so it is a little bit different. But yeah, it is. I do understand that concern as well. Right. So does that, Diane? Does that conclude your testimony?
Yeah, I could go on, but that's plenty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. And while we have public reopen, again, if there's anyone else who would like to testify regarding this application, use the raise hand function. Okay, there's no one else has hands raised, so I would say that we can go ahead and reclose public comment.
Motion to close public comment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so that moves us into staff comment.
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Who seconded that motion?
Sandcamp.
Tony Sankamp.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving into staff comment. So I'll put up the staff report. So this is a application with a lot of different components to it. We'll start by reviewing the components that staff has no objection to. So we'll scroll down in the staff report to our comments and recommendations. We have we take no exception to the window decal, interior tenant fit out, and the ventilation system in the rear. All of those are standard components of a restaurant fit out, and staff does not believe that they're going to have any impact on the surrounding historic district. However, as you move into the other parts of the application, within the way our ordinance has us look at things, there are a couple of flags that are raised. So the first is regarding the storefront system. So I'm sure the commission, or at least the commissioners who were on the commission, remember we had a window application come in for this building in the fall of 2019 into the winter, January-ish of 2020, for new windows for the building. It was a window master plan, essentially, of all of the tenant spaces above, basically everything above this floor, where they were matching everything except for the material. They were aluminum windows, but all of the details and more or less most of the sizing also matched as well. So now we have a tenant coming in for a partial storefront replacement. And I say partial because even though they're doing their tenant space, there is a significant amount of storefront space on the ground floor of this building. Our design standards read that if the replacement of the storefront is necessary, the design of the new storefront shall reproduce a historic storefront in terms of its configuration, materials, placement, proportions, and extent of glazed area. And that it should be based on either surviving historic storefronts on the building or documentary evidence such as old photographs. We do have an old photograph showing the storefront, which we've seen a couple of different times this evening. But it shows that the storefront has, let me just stop sharing my screen for a second so I can pull up that photo. The historic storefront was considerably different than the storefront that is being proposed this evening. It appears to be made of wood. It also appears to have operable transoms, as well as a significantly different profile. Obviously, at some point over time, the storefront was changed and the proposed new storefront matches what was put in. Well, I'll pull this back up again, sorry. All right, so let's bring out this photo again. Right, so you can see it most clearly on this side of the screen where you have a significantly different profile of a storefront in addition to operable transoms that are pretty obvious that they're operable transoms. And our ordinance states that if we're approving the replacement of a storefront, we should be matching the historic site evidence. Staff obviously notes that it would look different than the remaining storefronts on the building, but that is what our ordinance guides us to do. In regards to the exterior sign, our ordinance states, and I'll put the staff report back up again. That any exterior sign should reflect the historic character of the area and will respect the size, scale, mass of the facade, building height rhythms, and the size of windows and door openings. So we noted at some point during commission comment that there are other blade signs in the area surrounding this building. While staff takes no objection to most blade signs, there are no blade signs on this building, right? And we have commercial use all at the rear, all at the base of the building. There is a store across around the corner that has their signage on window awnings. And then the other restaurant uses within the building utilize window signage. The blade signs that were north of this, from what I can tell on the map, are outside of the historic district. And then the other sign that was mentioned, the one on Buddy Who's, is not an approved sign. That does not have an approval. So, and again, not the blade signage is historically appropriate. You see use of historic blade signage throughout Jersey City and throughout this time period historically when the building would have been constructed. We just don't have it on this building. And historically, we haven't really seen it utilized where it is attached directly to the building and the blade signage itself is illuminated. We have external signage that has a small light on top of it to show onto the sign. But the sign is almost always made out of a historically appropriate material. And it's almost always attached from a bar at the top where the blade signage itself is movable. So taking all of that into consideration, as presented, there are components of the application that would not have an adverse effect on the historic district. And there are components of the application that per our ordinance, there would be an adverse effect on the historic district. So in the staff report, we outlined 3 ordinance citations where if the commission felt that there was an adverse effect, you could deny an application, as well as provided suggested conditions if after discussion, the commission felt that this was an appropriate application. Do any commissioners have questions for staff?
Yeah, one question I have, Maggie, this is Commissioner Gucciardo. If we meet the standard for window treatment and it's only on part of the storefront of the building, is that necessarily a problem that it doesn't match the remaining storefronts that aren't being addressed at this time? It would probably wouldn't it just set a precedent for what those storefronts would have to do at the time that they change their fronts as well?
From a staff and historic preservation perspective, yes.
If I also may, I mean, the owner of the building, the applicant is not the owner, they're a proposed tenant in the property. The owner of the building is only permitting so much work to be performed to the storefront. So this is something that the owner would permit to happen. I'm not sure that the owner would want mismatching storefronts along the ground floor.
Well, the owner might want to think about a master plan for the future replacement of all storefronts as well, so that as over time, the storefronts are replaced as per the historic photographs. So that is something that they might want to consider depending on any action the commission takes tonight and how this discussion goes.
Yeah, it's absolutely something we could pass along to ownership. I mean, I know there was a lot of interaction between the tenant and ownership trying to put this application into a position that they would approve. Because as any tenant renting any space, if they're going to do tenant improvements, the landlord has to be a party to them and accept them. So, in some ways we're dealing with what we can deal with.
This is Commissioner Peppin. Maggie, was there any discussion with the applicant, between the applicant and the staff, about making the signage more historically appropriate or making it more acceptable based on our standards?
Yeah, so we did go back and forth quite a bit about the signage, and I think Eric would agree this was like the third or fourth revision to the signage, just based on what they originally came in with, and then we worked it a little bit. Nick, I forget if it was Nick or Eric, mentioned during their testimony that the historic signage, or at least that what is shown in the historic photograph, you would not be able to do today without a variance. So I believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the intention was to, I don't know if this was the final sign, but that was kind of where the conversation we left, was that it wasn't out of the question to eventually do something else, but this is what they were proposing at that time because of the hurdle that it's not permitted to do that anymore.
Yeah, Maggie, I think that's accurate. I think number one, there's kind of two influences. One is it's a franchise, so signage is also dictated a little bit by, the corporation. So, some of the look, some of the feel, there's got to be consistent messaging across the brand, and that's part of what we're dealing with. The other part is that we wanted to keep the application in a position where it wouldn't need additional approvals, either at the planning or the zoning board level. So the signage, the concepts put forth, all keep this a permitted use, permitted sign sizes, everything else is permitted, but for this board's certificate.
And I don't think we would need, I don't think anyone here is asking for the signage to be recreated, specifically as per seen in that photograph, which looks to be from sometime in the 50s based on the cars.
I guesstimated early 50s.
Yeah. I don't know what the tax photo shows from 1940. We don't have a tax photo for this. We have this photo and a postcard photo. Okay. So I don't think anyone is saying that you have to recreate that exactly, but I think there might be a balance between the two and finding something that is a little more appropriate to the building and to the district, but without exactly recreating what was there historically. The thing I'm a little more concerned about is the storefront. Because this, in that photograph, there are large pieces of infill, likely cast iron in there. Then with the operable transoms up top. Can you go to the left and into the Washington Street elevation?
This side?
Yeah, just that portion. Yeah, it definitely looks like cast iron to me.
You also
go ahead, Paul.
You also get a real sense of how far back the windows are set from the actual framing. The glazing looks like it's a good 8 inches back from the wood framing or whatever the cast iron metal framing we see. where the proposed is just a flat surface with no protrusions or setbacks of any kind. And I'm with you, Brian. My concern is the storefront, because this is going to set precedent for the rest of the storefronts as they get replaced, and we're way off track here.
Yeah, and we've been pretty firm in the past with, you know, other applicants in the past about storefronts, and you know, there were people who have come in and wanted to deviate from the historic photographs, and I think you know, we were pretty firm with them that, you know, they needed to follow the rules. So it would make me uncomfortable to approve something that isn't even recalling the historic configuration. I don't know if this is going to be one where it would be hard to match exactly the historic, but I do think that at least some effort to recall the historic storefront needs to be made here, and not just kind of replace what was there. But that's my opinion, and can see what the other commissioners think. And, you know, I would understand that, yeah, one replacing one and not the others might be a little weird, but, you know, it does happen where, you know, buildings follow master plans, and as the other storefronts get changed out, so do the other storefronts. And then there's a plan, you know, and it's done over time. And it's all accomplished. So I think that's kind of where I stand on this. Yeah, the flue, I think, is very easily approvable. Obviously, that's the very easy part of this. And I think the sign could use a little massaging, but it's close. But it's the storefront that I think is a little problematic.
Ryan, if I may speak on the storefront, you know, a storefront framing system like that, you know, will not be up to current energy efficiency. You know, so that's part of the you know, obviously, as Nicholas had said, you know, the building owner had requested, you know, the uniformity, but also, you know, the energy efficiency of what we're proposing would far exceed what was there and what would be there if it was built in that way.
Okay, well, our rules really don't talk about, you know, energy efficiency. We're looking at to match the, you know, historic as closely as we can. And that's what we're looking at here. And there are many other different ways you can meet energy efficiency. So, you know, I don't think that's really part of the equation of what we're looking at. I think we're all for increased energy efficiency, but there are many different ways that you can do that.
We do need to maintain certain envelope efficiencies, and this is our only envelope. So yes, there's lighting and mechanicals, but the envelope deals directly with the storefront, and that is something that the building department would review. So something to keep in mind.
Okay, well, that
Maggie,
doesn't mean that we need to approve this storefront.
I'm sorry, Brian, can you repeat yourself?
No, I'm just saying that doesn't mean that we need to accept this storefront. That's all.
Yeah, that isn't, I mean, when we've done historic storefront replications and reconstructions in the past, we haven't had that issue with the building department, specifically regarding an energy code. I believe that
Maggie,
usually
a
is.
question for you, Maggie, about the what we did approve for the fenestration for the rest of the building. Was that actually installed or has not been installed yet? Has not been done
No,
yet?
it has not been installed yet. No, if you remember during that application, they also had a cone that was approved for facade repairs. So general facade cleaning, repointing, things like that. They do have that cone. I do not know, to my knowledge, they haven't started work on it. But in the way that it was explained to both staff and the commission was that they were going to be doing the facade repairs first. And then the windows were going to be on a tenant by tenant basis.
So this almost is a piggyback to what we've already accomplished in terms of guidelines for the rest of the building. Also addresses dark versus light, you could be consistent across the whole structure with a look if we could bring the storefront into line, both historically and consistent with the rest of the building.
Yeah, this just only because you actually did ask this question before, but I wasn't going to jump in before staff comment. The windows that we approved were actually a lighter color. They were like a lime. Yeah, they were like a limestone color.
Oh,
I believe there's actually one. It's fine. It was 2 years ago, pandemic ago.
Terrible
Who's
memory.
to remember? There is one installed on the Washington Street side, though.
I see. Okay, that helps me a lot. Thank you.
What I'd like to mention also to the rest of the commissioners, some who were on the upper portion window application, is that we really scrutinized over the windows on the upper portion of the building. And we spent a good amount of time making sure that the details were copied to best possible from what we can find on a historic search, I should say, as they were peeling stuff back. So that, given that we were so intent and so specific about the upper windows, I really feel that we cannot give this storefront a pass with having no details or no historic fabric or even a replication or even a hint of what was there, originally. So I kind of feel like I'd almost be happy if nothing happens to the storefront at all, rather than replace it with a similar incorrect storefront.
You make a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So I'm just sensing the pulse of the board, and we're coming up against a bit of an issue with landlords. So, what might make sense at this point is, I certainly hear you loud and clearly. I'm sure the applicant does as well. And it may make sense just to figure out if we can continue with this particular portion of the application. If the landlord will give us a little bit of flexibility, or if that component is going to be removed altogether. That might make the most sense at this point. We do have a fair amount of testimony on the record already regarding the other components of it. So, yeah.
We have room on the our next meeting's October 25th. Yeah, 25th. And we have room on it if you would like to proceed that way.
Yes.
Okay.
Just a comment that I wanted to make. I noted that the replacement storefront, like my fellow commissioners have been stating, is very similar to its predecessor, which is much lighter weight. The framing is much lighter weight than what was historically there. If you're going to come back, you might want to look at the possibility of doing something heavier weight so that it would reflect and match what was closer to what the historic was. If you just, the weight, I think, is one of the things. And like my fellow Commissioner Blasek was saying, that it looked to be metal, so it was cast, but if you went with metal, I think that would be good. And then the other thing was, if you're not thinking of going that way, or it doesn't seem like you're going to have the bandwidth to do that, or the owner isn't interested, it might just be, what it appears to me that you're doing is you're just changing the glazing, which is something you could do with keeping the original, that storefront in there. If you wanted to have clear glazing in the transom area, you could maybe just change that glazing. Just my thoughts.
So if I may add, I believe it was Paul that said, you would prefer to keep it existing than propose something like this. So, I believe we would prefer to keep it existing instead of swap it out with a cast iron wood type storefront system, and just swap out the upper glazing to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we can talk with the landlord and the applicant further about, but that may very well be the way we've got to go, Eric. Yeah. Based on what we know.
Maggie, is that a option that they have to leave the system in place and change out the glazing? Does that
Yeah, we
satisfy
can't-
our application?
I mean, it satisfies our ordinance in a sense that if they would like to switch out a piece of glazing, as long as the glazing size does not change, they can do that.
I see.
We can't make anyone change anything.
And I think the other piece of it was to make some revisions to the proposed blade sign, right?
Yeah, I think there was plenty of feedback on that, so they should, huddle up and decide how they want to move forward with that.
Yeah.
So I think
One
then,
thought I had about, one
I was
thought I
just
had
gonna
about that. I had a thought about it, sorry, Brian. And that was that if there's existing damage to that column that shows that there was an existing blade sign there before, then if they brought that forward, I think that if we had that information, we'd be able to make a better judgment on it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can investigate that in the meantime.
All right.
Okay, so since the attorney is, I guess, asking to carry this to the next, are we gonna have a motion then to carry this to the next available date, to a certain date, or how do we want to do that, Maggie?
I mean, we can put it on the 25th. I have exactly one spot on the 25th, so.
Okay. So then, if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Charami, we'll, and of course, if that ends up being too soon, you could always push back further, but we'll make a motion to carry this to the October 25th Preservation Commission hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, I didn't get the motion. You made the motion, Brian?
Yeah, the motion to carry this to the October 25th HPC meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Second is Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm looking at like 14 boxes at the same time.
I know, it's okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Nick, we will see you guys on the 25th.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. You're the next one, so I'm just going to keep you on.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I got to just get that agenda back up. Okay, next is 9B. This is H21-39, Stephen Joseph Esquire, on behalf of David Tuck, owner. This is 57.5 Bright Street, block 13904, lot 11, in the Van Voorst Park Historic District. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for interior renovations and construction of 2 rear decks at the first and second stories of an altered contributing Greek Revival influenced row house built circa 1860. This is a recommendation to the Jersey City Zoning Board of Adjustment.
I believe we need to swear Steve in. So if you, there we go.
Okay.
There you go.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. That's it.
And if you could just state and spell your name for the record.
Full name is Stephen with a PH. Last name is Kawalek.
Great. And Nick, and Steve, I presume have you qualified, testified in front of this board before?
I haven't actually. My father did the last time, I think.
Great. All right. Nick, if you could just run us through
Sure,
qualifications quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Steve, are you a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
All right. Is your license current at this time?
Yes, it is.
All right. Did you prepare and are you familiar with the plans
Yes,
presenting tonight? And have you testified before boards like this in the past?
I have.
I've
just asked that the board accept his qualifications.
Okay. Staff recommends that Mr. Kawalek, is that, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last? Kawalek, okay. Be qualified as an expert in the field of architecture.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem. And you should be able to share your screen.
Right. Thank you so much. So just a little bit of background. So Nicholas Trami appearing for The applicant this evening and the owner of the property, David Tuck. Our our architect rather, is Mr. Kowalik, who we've just qualified. Just a bit of orientation. The property itself sits about mid-block on Bright Street, so it is in a historic neighborhood. We did get a couple of specs on the property in the past. It was built in the 1870s. The application before us this evening is for the addition, or I should say the construction rather, of a rear deck on both the first and second floors. The second floor is significantly smaller, more of a balcony, but our architect will take us through that. We did present before Van Voorst back in July, and we kind of took them through the plans. We felt that meeting went very well, and we didn't really receive any objections at the time. I think without further ado, we'll let Steve take us through the plans and yeah. Steve.
Okay, good evening, everybody. As Nick mentioned, this is an existing, it's a two-family, three-story attached row house. It's located at 57.5 Bright Street, and it's on an undersized, irregularly shaped flag lot, which you can see in the drawing that's on the screen now. There's a sort of flag portion at the rear, and it's a pretty small building, part of a row that I think was probably originally all the same depth, and others have been extended, and this one remains at what I believe to be the original depth. So as part of a larger, generally interior renovation, the applicant wishes to construct a bi-level deck at the parlor floor and at the second floor with stairs from the parlor level down to grade at the rear yard. We're not proposing any changes at the front of the building at all. This is entirely at the rear. So there's an existing small extension now, which I'll point to here, about 31 square feet in size, which starts at grade and extends through the parlor floor. And that's basically where the back door, the existing back door exits. You know, it's basically like a glorified enclosed stair landing. There's some shelves built in there, and that exits onto kind of a ramshackle wooden stair down to grade. Applicant proposes to remove that along with the steps, and also proposes to remove the existing vinyl siding and vinyl replacement windows that currently exist at the rear of the property. Applicant proposes to install new windows in a modified configuration and to create two new French doors at the parlor and second floor levels. Windows are proposed to be Anderson A series with a dove gray exterior, colonial grills, and nickel hardware. French doors will lead to the two new decks that I mentioned earlier. At the parlor level, we have a roughly 200 square foot deck with a sort of a sawtooth configuration and stairs down to grade. And this has been designed not to extend further back than the shallower of the two buildings on each side. So on the one side here, we have a building that extends back to this point. On this side, we extend back to this point. So we're keeping flush with the shallower of the two adjacent buildings. So at the second floor level, we have a significantly smaller deck, and I can show you those plans more closely. At the second floor level, we have a deck that extends out only about 4 feet. It's essentially a balcony that serves the existing bedroom at the rear of the house. Both decks would be constructed of wood. We've got a series of columns at grade and some overhead girders, wood floor joists, and would be clad, finished in composite material by Trex. All the decking, fascias, railings, trims would be the Trex pebble gray color. And that, I believe, is shown on this sheet. I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, that's essentially the the decking color and the railing profile. The decks are also proposed to be illuminated by some wall-mounted light fixtures, which are shown here. Two at each floor level, essentially. In the area underneath the lower deck would have some lights at the ceiling, essentially underneath the floor of the deck. And that area would also be covered with some 7 by 11 inch pavers, also in a gray color. And finally, we're proposing to re-side the rear facade with a hardy plank siding in an Arctic white color with matching hardy trim for doors and windows. And that's essentially the extent of the work that's proposed.
Steve, thank you very much. One quick question. So would any of this be visible from the public right of way?
None of it is visible from the right of way. The buildings at the front are all attached. And our block is fairly contained. You know, there's no views from, you know, like an alleyway from the other side of the street or something that would have a view through. It's basically only visible from the rear.
Thank you. Would you mind just bringing up the site plan real quick? I just wanted to point out for the board that, you know, should the board feel fit to grant the certificate of appropriateness on this particular one, the applicant would be proceeding to the planning board. And I just wanted to point out why the rear of the property is irregularly shaped. So if the reverse L shape there were filled in completely, we'd have a conforming depth, but because we don't, we'll have to go on to planning for a variance for that space.
Nick, do you mean zoning board?
I'm sorry. Yes, zoning.
Okay.
Thank you. I always have bulk in my mind, but I appreciate that, Brian.
And that's because it doesn't meet the required 30-foot rear yard setback, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the setback to the deepest portion of the lot? I can't read it.
Yeah, if you just zoom in on that a little bit, Steve.
So from the end of the deck to the deepest point, we have about 34'6", and we're 20 feet shorter here. So we have 14'6" to the shallower portion of the lot.
And so the two buildings on either side, there are additions that go back, and I can see where your mouse is there. So that's an addition to the left there, and to the right there, it actually goes back even further.
Correct.
And how many stories are those additions?
Those are full height additions. So they're well, let me see if I don't know if I can change windows here. Can you see this screen here?
No, we still see the.
Yeah, you're gonna have to reshare your screen.
Okay, all right, let me stop that. And let's do this. Okay, do you see that sort of aerial shot?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so we're here. This is our site here. That's the little bump out that exists there, the existing stairs down. This is kind of a newer building. I'm not sure when it was constructed, and that comes back, you know, and that's a taller building. That's a full story taller than the subject property. And then the building on this side where my mouse is now, this is all a recent construction. So this rear addition here is, you know, you can see in this image it's under construction. And I would say that was only finished fairly recently since I started this project. And they've come back as far as the building to the opposite side of them.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Are there any questions?
Are there any commissioner questions?
I have no questions.
Okay. All right. It doesn't sound like there's any commissioner questions. Nick and Steve, does that conclude your testimony?
It does.
Great. We'll move on to public comment. There are any members of the public in attendance who would like to speak regarding this application, please use the raise hand function or press *9 on your phone. Okay, staff sees no hands raised and would recommend a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion to
Motion.
open public comments.
Second,
All right, I had Commissioner Lewis and then I think I heard Stephen Gucciardo over anyone
yes,
else.
please.
So all in favor?
So what else is new?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
okay. And Sarah is going to take us away on staff comment.
Okay, can pull up my staff report here. Can you see my screen?
We
No,
just see black.
Better?
nothing yet.
Just trying to verify.
Sarah, I have it downloaded too, if you want me to throw it up on the screen.
That might be easier. My computer hates me.
Okay. Just pull it up quick. All right. Do you want me to go down to staff recommendations?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can we see that?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, so staff recommendations. As Nick stated, the reason this is coming before the board is for the variance for the undersized lot, the flag lot. The demolition of that small extension, it's not original, the steps aren't original, so they would not have an adverse effect on the building or the Van Forest Park Historic Districts. As the architect stated, the rear decks won't be visible from any public right of way, and therefore will not have an adverse effect on the historic districts. It is staff's opinion that I said all that. HGC staff recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness and recommendation to the zoning board of adjustment with the following conditions, which mainly are our standard conditions, except for that the rear deck shall not be visible, as previously stated, and that there is proposed rear lighting in the application, that rear lighting be downcast and minimal as possible.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff? Okay. So Sarah, just confirm what the recommendation is.
Recommendation for an approval of a certificate of appropriateness and recommend to the zoning board of adjustment.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the conditions.
Second,
Second.
Okay, I have, Nick, does your client accept the conditions as read into the record and on the staff report?
Yes, they're acceptable.
Okay, and we'll move to a roll call vote. Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Aye.
Commissioner Gucciardo.
aye.
Commissioner Gordon.
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
Commissioner Peppin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandkamp.
Aye.
And Chairman Blazak.
Aye.
Okay, there are 8 votes in favor, none against, no abstentions. The certificate of appropriateness and recommendation for approval to the planning board is granted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No problem. So Brian, you want to go ahead and call the next application?
Now we have 9C. This is H21 232. Jeff Jordan, RA, on behalf of 219 221 Warren Street owner LLC. This is 219 221 Warren Street, block 14202, lot 20 in the Paulus Hook Historic District. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for the restoration and partial reconstruction of the front facade, interior renovations, and construction of a 3-story rear addition visible from the public right-of-way at 219 221 Warren Street, an altered contributing transitional Italianate townhouse constructed circa 1870.
Gotta give Nick a second to rejoin. I accidentally demoted him. I'm sorry, Nick.
No, don't worry about it.
All right, let's just swear Jeff in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you. All set.
Okay. And then just state and spell your name for the record, Jeff.
Sure. It's Jeff Jordan, Jeff Jordan.
Thanks. And staff notes that Jeff has previously been qualified in front of this board many, many times.
Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll just dive right in. So Nicholas Tramy appearing.
1 second, excuse me. Can you hold on 1 second? I just have to plug in my battery in here. I'll plug my computer in here.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. So Nicholas Tramy appearing for the applicant 219 221 Warren Street, owner LLC. As we had just noted, Jeff Jordan is our architect. The application before you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness on the particular site. The property is going through a renovation, which Jeff will walk us through. Namely, we're before this board for the front facade, some interior renovation, the construction of a 3-story rear yard addition. And I think with that introduction, Jeff can take us out.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nick. Maggie, may I share my screen?
You should be able to.
All right.
Actually, Jeff, before you begin testifying, we did have that one thing we had to just mark as evidence.
Correct.
Yeah, so if you could just put that up on the screen. We're gonna mark, this is an update just for the commission's benefit. This is an updated material specifications list that we can just mark as A1.
Thank you, Maggie.
Right. No problem.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for hearing us tonight. As Nick pointed out, we are working at 219 221 Warren Street. These are two row house buildings that are actually adjoined, and currently, or previously, I should say, were used as a funeral home on the lower 2 floors and as 2 single level flats, 2 apartments on the upper 2 floors. Our client has purchased the property, and they have an intention of changing it to a 3-family. So limiting the commercial use and reconfiguring the units on the interior, which I'll show you. And then additionally, removing the existing rear yard additions. You can see those additions here. I'm not sure when these were built, but they hosted portions of the funeral home, different facilities for them, and are in very poor condition and are very strangely appointed right now. And so the idea would be to remove those and build a new 3-story rear yard addition in their place. The property, just to orient you, is on Warren Street between Sussex and Grand. You can see here in the existing block plan where the extent of the rear yard additions presently, and then in the proposed block plan, the extent of the rear yard additions as we're imagining them. So as I point out, those 2 rear yard additions would be removed. A new rear yard addition will be built in its place. Additionally, there would be new landscaping, new wood fencing, and new paver patios in the backyard. The backyards right now are essentially just a collection of weeds and haven't been used clearly in a long time. The other portion of the application that's worth pointing out is the front, the work to the front. And so I'll just take you back to this photograph. As you can see, at some point in time, the stoop and entry at 221 had been removed and a new entrance had been provided at the lower level for the funeral home. The intent with the application is to remove the awning that may already be gone actually, and build a new stoop, new entry, new pediment in its place. So just that's kind of the breadth of what we're doing on the front. All right, so I'll quickly take you through the plans. As I pointed out, the idea is to turn into a 3-family. The lower 2 floors on each side would consist of duplex units. So side-by-side duplex units, each accessible from the front and each with their own rear yard access. The upper 2 floors would become a wider, full width duplex unit for the owner. That unit is accessible from the 219 stoop via interior stair, and would also have its own separate rear egress stair with dedicated access out the back of the property. Just moving over to the front facade for a moment. As I mentioned, the intent is to remove the window here, reintroduce an entryway and a new stoop. You can see that here. I'll get into more detail about this stoop and the pediment, but I wanted to give you the overall look of what we're doing here. This is existing to the right at 219. So no work to that other than painting it and replacing the doors with new historically accurate wood doors. At 221, a new stoop would be built, new pediment. Additionally, all the windows are going to be replaced with historically accurate double hung wood windows with the eyebrow tops. And then there'll be some miscellaneous painting of the cornice, of the sills and lintels, just sort of bringing everything in line. The colors I'll take you through in a moment. But that's, the front facade. Essentially, the idea is to restore more or less to what it was. We don't have the 1938 photo for this property, but the idea was to, pick up on the rhythm of what's happening on this block with the new work that we're doing at the front here. The back of the property, as I mentioned, has these 2 poorly conditioned additions. Those would be removed, and in their place, we're proposing 3-story additions. Again, the lower 2 floors are for the duplex units side by side, and then the top 2 floors, including the 3rd floor of the addition and the 4th floor of the building, which is set back, would be for the owner's duplex unit. I'll take you through the materials on those in a moment. And as I pointed out, there's a separate rear egress stair that splits those 2 volumes and kind of distinguishes them from each other and breaks up the overall massing of the back. So it looks more like the the scale of the buildings originally as row house units. Visibility. The building is visible from Sussex. Or I should say the proposed addition would be visible from Sussex. You can see at 223, they have a rear yard addition, which you see in section here, which actually extends further back than the 30-foot rear yard setback. We're proposing going right to that 30-foot rear yard setback, so there are no variances required for this. But because of the additional height at 3 stories versus the 2 adjacent, you would see the top portion of the addition from Sussex. So here's a view diagram. Obviously on this side of Sussex, it's less visible. As you go to the other side opposite, you would see a little bit more of it. Section cuts through the building, just describing again that the original 4-story building remains, the massing of that remains clear, whereas the addition is at 3 stories in the back. Some details. These are details for the rear. We're proposing a cable rail, metal handrail, more of a modern look in the back with wood fencing in the backyard. What I want to point out, however, is the front. And so I had conversations with the neighborhood association in this case regarding the look of this. The idea was to essentially rebuild the stoop, try and make it as historically accurate as we can. Again, we don't have that 38 tax photo, so we're trying to riff on what we're finding on the block. And so the first element is the new guardrail. This mimics what is happening, I believe, at 225 or 213, 215, something like that. There's a couple of properties down the street that have a very similar look with the wrought iron, the ornamentation. Because that is open and doesn't meet current codes, we're also proposing a sort of thin stainless steel cable or mesh product that would go in between there. I'll show you again images of that in a moment. But the idea is that the primary structure would mimic what would have been done historically. Additionally, we're proposing a cast iron or a cast stone pediment around the door, a new transom window, and then again, the new wood doors. So like I said, the idea is to try and make this as historically accurate as we can, given the limited information that's available for this property. Quickly, I'll take you through the colors and materials. So this is Benjamin Moore Tudor Brown. This is the color that we are proposing for the front facade, for the cornice, for the sill and lintel, for the pediments, that sort of thing. This is Benjamin Moore Stonington Gray. This color would be used on existing stucco on the rear of the building.
I'm sorry, what is the color? Can you say it again? It's a little bit slower? Stone
Sure.
what?
Stonington Gray.
Thank you.
Yep. This is Benjamin Moore Black. It doesn't have a fancy name. It's just black. That would be used at the steel balcony frames in the back of the building, the painted metal stair. That's more or less all in the back of the building. This is the stone, cast stone that we're proposing for the front stoop, the stairs for the new stoop. Marvin window frames in black, ebony, they call it. The rear material is it's a fiber cement material, but it's actually meant to look like wood. It's from a company called Nichiha, and the product's vintage wood, and the color is spruce. So, actual wood presents a serious maintenance problem, especially on a 3-story addition. And so this is meant to look like that without the maintenance. The coping material on the back of the building, again, black. It's a lot of black on the back. I apologize for the multiple colors, but I want to show them all. The lights that we're proposing on the back are just a very simple cylinder light, downcast. And then finally, this is the mesh product I was talking about. That would be an infill material. This is used, you may have seen it in the High Line in New York City. This is used regularly in applications where you need to provide more of a barrier, and it's sort of a thin, kind of lightweight, visually lightweight material that would be infill between those cast iron elements. So I believe that is the entirety of my presentation, Nick.
Okay, thanks so much, Jeff. And just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, I just wanted to confirm that no variances are being sought. So really, we're just here for the certificate of appropriateness.
That is correct. Yeah, no variances for this one.
Right. That does conclude our direct presentation. Obviously, we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and if commissioners have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, thanks for your clear and great presentation, Jeff. A couple things that caught my eye starting at the front. On the building on the right, was any thought given to removing that door that's there at the one at the basement level? You're removing the door to the left, which is, I think, the entrance to the office, or was the office. I think that door is not, I don't think that door is original to the building. I think that it was a later alteration. If we're restoring these two buildings, I think it would probably make sense to remove that door to have an entry under the stoop, if that's possible. So that was my first question. So if you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address that. So we did look at that, and that came up in my conversation with the neighborhood association. Our clients were interested in keeping that door. They like the flexibility it offers for that lower unit. I will add that the door to the office over here is going to remain under the stoop, and that will provide another point of access to the duplex on that side. But the idea was to keep this for now. Again, they like the flexibility it offers them with that lower unit.
Okay. The window configuration, you're showing a 1/1 configuration. I don't know what else is extant on that row, but the building's 1870. It probably would be very early for 1/1 windows. So I don't know if, we don't have a tax photograph on this. We don't have any on the entire row.
No,
No.
this was one of like it's like this one in Washington that we have nothing for.
Yeah.
Sandy got to him before we could.
So
we will defer to your expertise. You guys are the experts on this. If it's a 2/2 or 4/4, whatever makes sense here, we have no objection to that.
yeah, I would think, I don't know. I would have to think about it a little bit, but and I'll also bring that question up as part of the discussion for the commissioners. But I do think some sort of either 2/2 or 4/4 probably would be appropriate. If there are any other on this row, we can take a look at that and go from there. And then my one thing on the rear, if maybe you can go to the existing and proposed elevations.
Yep.
Is that you're completely blowing out and combining all the windows on the top floor. This is, part of a row that you can see very regularized windows and window openings, and you can see it from the public right of way from what is that, Morris Street, right?
It's Sussex
Street. So I think that to me is a little bit of an issue. Are you completely rebuilding that rear facade?
No, the idea is that you're right, we are opening that, or proposing opening that up. The rear facade, as far as we can tell, is in relatively good shape. The masonry seems to be intact. We'll know more once demolition is complete, of course, but this did come up. We discussed it with Maggie, and we had more opening back here, and she tethered us in a bit, and we tried to at least preserve the sort of scale of the window openings on the sides.
Yeah.
And open up the middle a bit more. So it's something we looked at and we were sensitive to. From the owner's perspective, that's, the top floor, that's a living space. It's facing south. It's sort of ideal to have a lot of glass there. And so we're trying to kind of, be respectful of the scale and rhythm to the extent that it is, visible and noticeable, but create a larger opening at the same time.
Yeah, and I totally understand why they would want that completely, and if this were probably in like a vacuum or not visible, I would have probably less of a problem with it. But I think with the visibility and the fact that it's part of that row and you're going to see it from, I forget it, Sussex Street.
Sussex, yep.
Sussex. And that there's already all this other glass below. I think that for me is a problem, is combining those openings. But I think that's, for me, that's what I'm thinking. I've been in this building, I've been in those two additions there. I know that's where they do like all the embalming and everything, so
yeah,
completely understand why they'd want to demolish it. So those are my thoughts to start off. So if other commissioners want to piggyback off me.
I would concur with Brian on the top floor windows, because it is clear that is the historic structure. All of the other houses in the row all seem to still have their windows in the right places. So I can concur with Brian on that. But I wanted to question you about the front facade. You are replacing the steps at 221 with a gray colored cast material. Why would it not be brownstone? to match the neighboring steps on all of the other houses, which I believe are all made of brownstone.
Yeah, no, you're right. That should be a brownstone or a brown tan type color.
Yeah.
We automatically default to grays, but you're right. The more appropriate color here would be a tan or a brown. So we're certainly open to that.
Okay, and then my other question is with the pediment treatment, is there a reason why you're not matching what is at 219 with what's going to happen at 221?
Yeah, so that came up in our discussions with the neighborhood association. And the feedback we received was that the existing pediment doesn't really do a great job of referencing anything historically, that it's kind of a poor remake that happened later on.
I agree.
Yeah, and so the challenge for us was to try and if you, I don't know if it's visible here, you can see the pediments actually vary quite a bit. There's no prevailing sort of appearance. Some of them have the arched top, some of them are flat, some of them have more articulation. And so we tried to find something that kind of picked up on elements of them in a straightforward way, was historically appropriate at least, if not definitely accurate. And so, yeah, our initial idea was actually just to mimic this, and since it's the same building, more or less, have them have the same pediment. But it's true, this is a kind of a poor later version of the pediment.
So is there any way that you can at least make them match each other? If you're going to redo a new one at 221, can you kind of maybe neaten up the one at 219 because it is kind of blobby and nondescript?
Yeah, my only concern with that would be is in removing it, it's, let me zoom in on it. It's a little bit wider and blobby, as you point out. I like blobby as a descriptor there. My concern is if we do remove that, there could be damage below the brick that would then be exposed, because this is a little bit narrower actually than what's here.
Yep.
And so I would just be concerned that in that process, we may actually create a bigger headache for ourselves than in keeping it. I do think that, we're proposing painting this and that so they are the same color. So at least at first glance, there's a visual connection between the two, even if the proportions aren't exactly right.
Okay, and that's also going to be painted the same brown color along with the windows and the doors. Everything will be the same.
Yep, exactly. All the trim, all the non-brick elements essentially would be that brown, Tudor brown.
And the other question I had is, are the heights of the doors consistent with any of the historic doors that are on the row, on the rest of the row, if there are any? And are there any glass in those doors, or are they solid wood?
So we're proposing glass upper lights with solid wood lower panels.
Okay.
And what I would propose here and what we've done in the past is, once we are underway with a contractor and we have shop drawings for the doors, that we've typically reviewed those with staff to confirm that the proportions are correct. And that's probably the time at which we'd actually go out and do a more thorough inventory of the other doors as well. And so if it's acceptable to the commission, I'd propose that we deal with those with staff, but our intent would be to match as closely as possible what would have been there historically, so the proportions are as accurate as they can be.
Okay, so if you can just flip back to the photograph you were just at. All right, so in the front gate area, will you be putting new wrought iron fencing up to match 217? Where all the rest of the row has that front gate area with a garden space. Will you be mimicking that? Will you be adding garden space back to the front of the building? Will you be leveling out the different heights between 221 and 219?
So the current thinking is, sorry, what was that last part, Commissioner?
One of the two, I think 221 has got a ramp going down to the doorway or something like that. No, it's just a visual. Yeah, it's stairs.
Yeah.
So I want to know if you're evening all of that out across the board there. Or what are we
The
doing?
current
there?
thinking is no. The only intervention to the front would be the new stoop over this portion. This depression would remain, and there isn't currently thinking about the fence in front and landscaping. You know, we can bring it up with the owners and see if that's something they're interested in. I imagine that once they actually develop the property and have owners here, that might be something the owners would want anyhow. So that's certainly something we could look into. It's not part of this application as currently drawn.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I piggyback on Commissioner Amatuzzo's comments? It looks like then that you're entering 221 under the stoop from the right side instead of the left. Is that right? So
Correct.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, because the cement sidewalk is much higher. There's no depression on the left side of that stoop.
That's
Right.
right, Commissioner. Yep, we would come down and to the right and to the left, there would be entries below.
You're
those
coming
stoops.
into that well. Yeah, understood. I would agree with Commissioner Blazak that door should probably go away since you're doing significant work on these facades. It doesn't feel right to me to pick and choose what restorations you're going to do. I think that middle door should go away and you should be entering the same as you're entering the other unit. And I would agree that some thought has to be given to this application for completing the treatment with the fences to continue the row. And along with that, you've proposed a railing system on the stairs. I believe the railing system, if other commissioners who might know more about this can correct me, but that design came much later than the period of this building. It was a simple solution that probably came in the 20th century to create a simple tubular railing with some details. And you've chosen that particular design. And then you have the need to infill because you don't have enough vertical obstruction, for safety reasons. So I think your railing has to be completely rethought. I think it should be something correct to the period. And by doing so, you'll eliminate the need for the modern mesh infill, which I think takes the restoration in a wrong direction.
I would concur with Commissioner Gucciardo on the railings and the mesh removal. The railings are most likely the pipe railings that you have designed seem to have become popular in the 1930s.
Correct. Yeah. So if you're recreating something, and even 219 has what I guess could be considered a more appropriate railing than the one you've proposed, Jeff. At least it's modern as well.
Sure.
And ultimately I would like that to be more of the period too, but I know you're not necessarily replacing that. And along with that, then the style of the stair configuration should be something of the period. They went to these sidewalls on the stairs much later. These stairs at the period were probably open. Yes, which you have. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't recall the drawing. So yeah, this stair design really requires a different railing.
So Commissioner, you're saying these walls would not have been part of that period's
Correct.
stoop? Yeah,
Correct.
so that came later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are my comments on the front. I would agree that you're probably looking at least a 2/2 window. On the back, I've been on these two blocks quite often, and when you're walking from the west and you're walking east, looking into these yards, you get you may not like the current extensions, but you do get tremendous brickwork. Everything's brick when you're approaching from the west walking east. And now we're going to have this vertical wood siding showing on the southern facade. and also the fenestration above. It's quite a departure and very visible from the public right away. I love the design. I love the modern approach. I'm just not sure it's appropriate for that to intrude on the historic fabric.
Commissioner, would you feel, sorry, just to follow up on that, Commissioner, would you feel differently if the window openings above or something similar in terms of those proportions were maintained? And so the distinction between the new and the old was more apparent?
Repeat that, please, for me. I'm sorry.
So my thought is that if the existing openings or something like this rhythm of, and scale of opening was maintained on that top floor, in contrast to a more modern and more open addition below, would that feel better, I wonder?
Well, I think so. And I think it might work, from a design point of view, because what you'd do then is you'd be creating a design that says the original building still exists and is made of brick and has this fenestration, and we've added a modern extension onto that.
Right.
That would tell a better story about the progression of the building through history, as opposed to totally remaking the facade in the back on the original structure.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I just have one question about the volume of the extensions.
Sure.
Is it within what's permitted by zoning? It looks like a lot to me, but it might just be the rendering.
Yeah, no, it's probably the perspective here, Commissioner. It's the rear facade, or the face of the rear addition is at the 30-foot rear setback. So it is within all the bulk requirements in terms of setback and volume. And the other thing is that we, typically when we're doing an addition in the historic district, we're always one floor lower than the original building, right? So if it's a 4-story building, we're doing 3. If it's a 3, we're doing 2. And so, yeah, it does feel large here. And this, of course, is a view no one will ever have. It's sort of a privileged view up from the middle here. In reality, you'd be seeing it kind of from Sussex and at sort of an oblique angle, but it works for these purposes.
And not to interject before staff comment, but it is also a double lot. So we're seeing essentially double the mass that we normally would.
That's
so
right. That's right.
If you look at them as like 2 side-by-side buildings, it does kind of visually reduce that.
Yeah, and that was part of our intent here. And it's, it may not be so clear in this rendering, just given the way the shadows are falling, but this is an open stair through the middle of these 2 volumes. And so the volumes really are broken down in a sense by that stair. So, it would have been fully as of right to come across and do a solid thing here, but I don't think it would have been appropriate given the scale and rhythm of the block and
Yeah.
all these.
I mean, I guess my concern is more just the height of it. If it's within zoning, then, it is, and that's fine. I mean, I think also partly maybe this rendering with the rail of the deck above is not doing any favors, because it appears to be like almost like another full floor,
right,
the way it's shown here. But I mean, I'm only concerned because it is highly visible from Sussex, and it will pop up above the other extension on the neighboring building.
That's a very good point, because in other applications, we really tried to minimize the view of a railing from the public right of way on the top of a structure. So there's a couple of concerns. We just also try to be consistent between applications and what we ask for.
Absolutely. And I think in this case, the proposed rail is a cable rail. Short of doing a glass rail, there's no more minimally visible railing option available. And so this, line drawing it's not really fair in terms of the how this would look in reality. If you've seen it, you've all seen cable rails, they sort of go away. And so we're trying to do our best here. So this is a case where the drawings are actually working against our intent, right? It looks much more massive, as Commissioner Gunther pointed out, than I think that probably will feel in reality.
Are there any other questions regarding this application? All right, hearing none. So where Nick and Jeff, does that conclude your testimony on this?
It does.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to public comment. Why don't we go ahead and someone would like to make a motion to open public comment?
I'll make a motion to open public comment.
I'll second.
And just a reminder for public comment, we should just take the testimony and we shouldn't get into a back and forth with the testimony and with the architect. So if the anyone doing public testimony can just state their testimony, and then we can give the architect a chance to respond after public testimony has closed.
Great. Okay, so if there are any members of the public in attendance who would like to speak regarding this application, please use the raise hand function. On the phone, it is *9. So staff does see one hand raised. Diane, I'm going to go ahead and promote you. Okay. And Diane, you're still under oath. So I do think we just need to restate your name for the record, and then you should be good to go.
It's Diane Case. Last name is spelled Kaese.
Great.
We have worked with Jeff on this, and the things that we were mostly concerned about were the door, the lower floor, the ground floor door, which we were hoping would be eliminated. Because the actual entrance to that unit, as he said, is off to the right. So that door really is redundant. And that would then change the whole look of that one ground floor area. The other thing was the stoop and the pediment on the new pediment, or actually the new whole entranceway. And our conversation with Jeff was pretty basic, and that was the one to the right is a really poor, you called it a blob, which is not far off. But if you look at all of the various renditions of a stoop pediment there, having another one that is different really doesn't matter at this point. It kind of adds to that entire cacophony of the pediments along the street. Our thought was that if we came back with a modern interpretation of that pediment, we would be happy. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're getting closer than we were initially, but I would love to see that tweaked a little bit more. And the real understanding of a pediment is that it's to shed water off. And what this does is it stops, and the water just is going to run down the sides. And if you understand that basic concept, the whole design of the pediment has to extend that a little bit further. So I think that still needs to be played with and worked with a little bit. I agree with the railing comments that were made by all of the commissioners. And other than that, the back is pretty much as of right. I love the change back to the all brick across the back and on the top floor if we possibly can. So I think we're going in the right direction here. I just don't think we're quite there yet. And I would love to have one more pass at this and hopefully sit down with Jeff and see if we can work something out to get that front facade a little bit more refined, because it's going to be our once in a lifetime opportunity to do that. So let's see if we can get it as refined as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
All right. Staff sees no other hands raised at this time. So I would recommend a motion to close public comment.
Motion, Sandcamp.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was second?
Me.
Okay, cool. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, it looks like Diane is back in attendees. So Jeff and Nick, I don't know if you want to address any of those public comments.
No, I mean, I think, she kind of encapsulated what we discussed. And so, yeah, I appreciate the comments and the feedback.
Okay, great. All right, so we can move into the staff portion of the application. Let me just put up the staff report quickly. All right. So I do have just one, I did find a typo on the staff report. I'm sure everyone's shocked that I had a typo on the staff report. In property and jurisdiction, it's not in the Harsmith Cove district. It's in Paul's Hook, as it says in like 17 other places on the staff report. Just missed that one. Anyway, so for recommendations and comments. So it's a big addition, right? It's not confusing to anyone. It's a large addition, but it's also a large building. So staff does it, the addition is consistent with what everything else is on the block. When you look at the block site plan, it's pretty clear that this building, as well as the ones on either side of it, both have rear yard additions that basically go to the 30-foot setback. They vary a little bit in height, but a 3-story rear yard addition is pretty typical for the historic district. We do acknowledge that it's visible. However, every addition on this block is visible, regardless of if there's something there on the corner lot, right? Because that corner lot, even if something were to be built there, assuming that they follow our bulk standards, they will also have a rear yard setback, which means that you're going to be able to see everything on this block, on the rear of these buildings as is. What's there now, what could be proposed there. So the addition being visible as proposed over the top of the adjacent addition it's relatively minimal. It's also not a secret that that's a developable lot. We are anticipating someone to do something with that lot at some point. So staff does recommend that the commission approve a certificate of appropriateness. We do not think that the application as proposed for the most part is not going to have an adverse effect on the historic district. We do have recommendations for conditions for this application. I've also been keeping track of some of the recommendations for conditions that the commissioners have brought up throughout the night. The first one that is not on the staff report that was mentioned during comments was to revise the stoop material to be brownstone and consistent with the rest of the rep. The second was to remove the door at the ground floor front facade. A third was to revise the proposed new railing at the front facade. We can talk about that one a little bit more in depth in a second. And then the last one was to continue to refine the front facade pediments with HPC staff. And then in addition to that, we have the proposed conditions in the staff report. So we have the applicant and architect shall prepare mock-ups of the front door pediment for HPC staff. That would be in addition to continuing to refine the construction drawings a little bit. And then from here on out, it's more or less standard conditions. So we do have these new lights going in at the rear. We recognize that the rear of the building is visible, so therefore everything should be downcast, relatively minimal in nature, and should not exceed it. 0.5-foot candles at the property line is what's written in the lighting ordinance. No one really goes around with a light meter to measure that, but the point here is that it should be relatively minimal. And then everything else is standard conditions. I will say before we ask if you have any questions for staff, regarding the railing at the front facade, is the commission's intent to revise that to be something that is more typical of a period appropriate railing, or for a modern interpretation of a railing?
My comments were
Stephen, Paul.
My comments were more appropriate to the period.
Okay.
Same for me, Maggie.
Okay. Revised railing at front facade to be appropriate for the style and period. Got it.
Which would most likely solve the code issue for safety as well.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff, comments, anything like that?
And did you read a condition for the top floor windows at the rear facade?
Nope, I'm sorry, forgot that one. Revise windows at top facade.
And obviously they could be extended to doors, I think the idea is to keep the, because you're not gonna obviously see the bottom of them anyway. So I think it's mainly keeping the width of them and extending them down to doors, possibly even all of them would probably be fine.
I would agree with that. I think it
Yeah.
would be perfectly appropriate to drop the sill to be able to use it as a door.
And to add on to that, I would like to hear from Jeff what he thought about maintaining the brick facade at that level. If that was in keeping or complementary to his design efforts here. And I would add, I think the other item that was discussed was window, possibly 2/2 or 4/4 was the other item.
Thank you. Yeah, staff has no concerns over, we are in agreement that a 1/1 is probably a little bit too early for this. The row itself has mostly 1/1. It appears to be replacement windows. However, a little bit further down the street, within the same row, there is 4/4s. And then the corner property is 2/2s. Are there any opinions, commentary on which? I personally think the 2/2s would probably be the most logical step here.
I would agree with that.
I agree, yeah.
Okay. Let's revise windows at front facades 2/2. Okay.
And I would agree too, on the top floor would be keeping that existing brick cladding. The existing brick should remain as well as the windows.
Okay.
Maggie, did you cover the plaster finish color on the stoop?
Yes, sorry, I'm out of frame. I didn't realize I was out of frame. Yes, we did. We are recommending a condition that the applicant revise the stoop material to be brownstone to conform with the rest of the block.
Maggie, did you say something about were we dropping windows down someplace? The Poly floor windows? Were they going back to their original length or?
I did not.
I think she was referring to dropping the sill at the top floor. So if we're maintaining those windows so that they could use those for access to the deck.
Are you talking about it in the back, the
Yeah.
rear? I'm sorry, I was talking about on the primary facade. Because I do notice that the house that has the 4/4 windows, they are down to the water table. And you can see on the other houses in the row where they have been filled in.
Oh.
So it's just a question. Are we going back to the original above the water table height for the Poly floor windows?
Can we see the photograph of the facade again, please? Is that still possible?
I can pull it up, Jeff, if you can.
Yeah, I was just looking at that as well to see. It's hard to tell, this brickwork is pretty clean here, actually.
We did a
If
good
you look
job.
at the old entryway where they filled in, it's pretty obvious. Whereas below here, between the sill and the water table, that looks to be either very well done or original.
All right, so
Yeah, it's pretty spotty throughout the row in terms
Wow,
of
that's incredibly well done.
Yeah.
So if you look at number, where am I? Just bear with me. 225, 227.
I think it's 229.
If you look at 229, you could see the infill brick. And if you look at 231, the windows, even though they're incorrect, it's the 4/4 with a flat top instead of the eyebrow. Those windows drop to the water table. So I'm just a little curious as where are we supposed to be with that? Also see in 225, no, 223, no, 227, I'm sorry. There's infill there. 225, you could see also that there's some infill. The bricks are not, I mean, the funeral parlor home windows look perfect above the modified middle entrance on the ground level there. Yeah, those look
Right.
pretty right, but I'm just curious. It just doesn't seem like that should be the height for parlor floor windows.
Okay,
like
so,
the ones-
so given,
Sorry,
so given that there's kind of a, oh, yeah, no, continue. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you guys are the experts here, but this, it looks like this building as well maybe didn't go down to the water table originally.
What I
Again,
was
you know, usually when you
propose
see these, the brickwork is so mediocre that it's obvious. These
Yeah.
are pretty good.
So what I was going to propose is if the client is willing to consider dropping the sills, that we can go out there to the site and not necessarily exploratory demo, but take a specific closer look and see if there's a mortar change or something like that, that would make it more obvious if those sills were dropped or not. And if they were in fact dropped, we could revise that on the plans if the owner would be open to those windows dropping potentially to the water table.
Can I just make one other statement? If we can go back to those photographs.
Sure.
The other houses in the row below the water table have brownstone treatment. Are we doing that on these two houses? The rest of the row has got brownstone as the water from the water table to the grade level. And then the two houses in question, 219 and 221, have this cornice break. What's happening there?
Do you want me to answer that? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to know if we're going to be consistent, then I think that both of those garden levels should be stuccoed like the rest of the row houses are, because it was that way originally, the water table. From the water table to grade level. If you look at the neighboring house to the right, and the ones down the row, everybody's got brownstone. Of course, some of it has been painted white, brown, black, whatever colors, but being
Could
with
make infilling that door a lot easier.
I was going to say the
Certainly
same
would.
thing, Maggie. Yeah, for sure. Solve that problem.
Is that cornice going away? As part
It
of
was
the,
I
not-
don't believe so.
Yeah, keep in mind, these were not, we weren't proposing any changes here. So everything, that's being discussed would be a departure from what we're showing. So removing that cornice, going with a brownstone water table, removing the door, presumably aligning the windows with the original windows. This would not have been filled probably originally, right? So I guess the question is like, where do we draw the line in terms of the amount of work that they have to do to satisfy
Good question.
the commission?
and it
good
becomes
question.
a philosophical question on our end too. I mean, these are significant changes to the building that have perhaps acquired their own significance over time. So it is a question that we should be asking ourselves as well, is what do we want to restore it to? And do we want to retain some semblance of the configuration of the funeral home and what was there? I think that's a question we should ask ourselves. Or do we want to, or is the goal to return it back to the original configuration of the building in 1870 or so?
My opinion about that, Brian, is that we are losing the commercial part of the building completely. And originally it was not commercial, it was residential. So I'm all for making it look like a full residential building and matching the rest of the row with the stuccoed water table, the removal of that center door. I just think it's really important
I would agree with that. At the point that you're returning the stoop and the pediment around the door, you're already going that direction. So I don't see the point of retaining any of the commercial aspects.
Can I just weigh in here?
Sure.
And I'll play the devil's advocate because, we've done this before where generally the idea is we're trying to improve upon a, kind of a mediocre existing condition, but always within the constraints of a client's budget, right? And so I have to go back to a client and say, look, this is what we got approved. You have to redo the entire facade. And now they're saying we can't afford to do that, or that wasn't our intent. The project has changed. And so my thinking is that the proposed changes are certainly an improvement over what is there now. When you take into account all the new windows, reintroducing a stoop where none exists currently, where it clearly would have been before, a new pediment, new entry doors, the positives far outweigh any negatives here, in my opinion. And we start down a slippery slope. And while I, as an architect and as peers, might want to see all that sort of redone, I don't think it's necessarily within the budget or maybe even the interest of the clients to go that far. And so I think, maybe the philosophical question is like, how much should be pushed in these situations? And how far can we take these things? And I think, what we're proposing is actually quite a lot, and does make a big improvement. I just get nervous that we'll get to the point where this is untenable for them. And the solution ends up being, no stoop, no pediment. We're just going to reuse this existing door for that unit because it technically would work for that duplex unit, and call it a day. And we've not improved this at all, right? And so I think we just run into a situation where maybe we make things too difficult and they don't get done. So that's my thought as an architect representing a client. While I think all these things would be beautiful and nice, I think it may just be too much in this situation. So.
Well, I have a comment on that note, and it's sort of like we're talking about like a magnitude of additional work that maybe they may or may not be interested in doing, but is it really that much more in the scope of this entire project? It looks to be fairly high end, fairly ambitious. Is it really going to be a deal breaker? Especially with what they're asking for on the back. It's a quite large build. It looks high end, good finishes. But could we do more for the public facing side of this building with the gardens and the door and the brownstone, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, so far, other than changes we would have asked for anyway about the railings and so forth, those are pretty standard comments from the board. I think what we've added, if anything, is the removal of the door and stuccoing the lower level. That doesn't seem to be a tremendous ask. And as far as enclosing, which I think, Maggie, you didn't add to your list, enclosure and having a front railing and gate so that there is, consistency with the row. Yeah, that's probably a little bit more ambitious, but not something we haven't asked of other applicants.
Jeff, can you put up your proposed front elevation again?
One comment I wanted to make, Jeff, is on 221, where you are removing, I'm sorry, 219. No, 221, where you are removing on the garden level, you're infilling the air conditioning opening with brick to match. Just another point we wanted to bring out about how much easier it would be to just stucco over the whole thing.
Okay, are there questions, additional comments?
Well, I'll just add a comment that while we aren't supposed to be considering the costs, I think we can always do more to improve a project. And I would hesitate to impose my vision of what the project could or should be. Our role here is to enforce the minimal standards for complying with the ordinance. And here I'm just wondering which section of the ordinance, which standard we're trying to enforce. If it's reconstruction, reconstruction is only appropriate when it's essential. So I'm just, wondering what would be our basis for denying it because the scope of the project doesn't meet our aspirations.
If I may, I think we were at the point we were discussing what's best for the property. And I believe it was a discussion. We didn't make any demands of the applicant yet. Very often when we have these discussions, the applicant agrees with the direction or the recommendations we're making. So unless if we have a disagreement and the applicant saying, no, what you've proposed, we're not willing to do, I mean, it's a conversation and it can easily be voluntary. In the interest of getting everyone to agree. So yeah, we could go right to what's absolutely allowed, but I'd prefer that we have a conversation with the applicant and see what they're willing to agree to.
And also, there is 345.7.1, there is restoration, which talks about restoration work being based on documentation such as physical evidence, original drawings, old photographs, identical buildings, that kind of thing. So I don't think we're necessarily out of our purview and asking for, especially when there's such a large rear yard addition for improvements on the front facade. I think the question for me, as I brought up, is more philosophical and what you want to restore it to, than necessarily, our purview. But now at this point, I feel like we're really in the weeds on this one, and I'm wondering what we're comfortable taking an action on here tonight, and almost wondering if we should ask them to, maybe come back in a couple weeks with having looked at this a little bit more and with a finalized package. But that's my, where I'm thinking of a little bit right now, because we're just so in the weeds on this.
Right. So I will just add to that. HPC aside, like our decisions aside, Nick and Jeff, if you think this can be satisfied by a brief call to the owner, we are due for a break. We do need about a 5-minute break. So if you think that can be satisfied in 5 minutes, we can certainly go that. I mean, aside from what action HPC is taking, that's notwithstanding.
Yeah, Matt,
just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that's fair. I think we can take just a few minutes and get the pulse of the owner on this one.
And can we just be clear on what exactly we're asking them, right? So there are a whole bunch of changes were proposed. So I just want to make sure we're absolutely clear on what we're going back to them
Sure.
with.
Sure. So what I have written down is the conditions in the staff report. In addition, that the applicant will revise the stoop material to be brownstone to match the rest of the row. The applicant will remove the ground floor door at the right-hand building. I honestly can't remember which one is. I think that's 221. At this point of the night, I can't remember which one it is. To revise the railing at the front facade to be appropriate for the style of the building and time period. To work with staff to fine tune elements on the front facade, including the pediment over the front facade door. To revise the windows, window openings at the top floor rear facade to keep them intact. To retain the exterior brick at the top floor of the rear facade. To revise the windows at the front facade to be 2/2. And to revise the site plan to include front yard railings to surround the front garden. And I have a note there that the front yard railing should also be appropriate for the style of the building and the time period. Did I miss anything?
The last item would be the recommendation to possibly stucco below the water table or brownstone below the water table,
Thank you.
as seen in other buildings in the row.
Okay, to revise the front facade to match the water table of the adjacent buildings.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so it's 8:54. We'll take a reset. We'll try to reconvene at 9. I understand if you might need a little bit more time to contact the owner, but we will recess now with the aim to come back at 9 p.m.
Okay. All right. See everyone back at 9. Remember to mute yourselves, please.
Okay, so thanks everyone for that moment. We did
Yeah, let's
confer with.
go back on. It's 9:02 p.m. We'll restart the meeting. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I apologize. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, no, so thanks for the moment. We did take a few minutes and just confer with ownership. I think the problem is it's a lot to digest right now. And, we kind of started getting into some concepts and some different things over the phone. We said, look, I think at this point, it's going to have a big impact on the interior of the building as well as the exterior and certainly economically. So I think the thought would be we would just carry it to kind of get a better handle on these couple of issues. As I think you can tell, the bulk of the board concerns and recommendations would be acceptable, but it's how to deal with the treatment below that line that's giving us some anxiety. So it would be our preference to carry it to a later date to just further take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also the good news for your client is that no one's really had an issue with the bulk of the addition. So, I think you can come out with a pretty positive thing out of tonight, and you have a lot on the record to review and come back with just something that satisfies some of our concerns. So,
understood.
In terms from a staff perspective, in terms of carrying, obviously we have no issue with carrying. I would recommend though that we phrase this carry as the next available meeting date. Next meeting is going to be pretty full. I said the application before this that it was the last spot. I would phrase it as next available meeting. So if we can fit it on the 25th, we can.
okay.
Like obviously, Jeff is likely to have another application at that meeting anyway. So if I can fit it on, I will. But that's how I would phrase it.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion to carry this to the next available meeting date.
Second.
Okay, so I have Blazak and Lewis to carry to the next available meeting date. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so we will see you guys at the next available meeting date. Jeff and Nick, I will be in contact as to when specifically that is, and I'll get you guys a write-up of the things that we've discussed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Let me get that agenda back up. I keep losing it. All right, the next case is 9D. This is H21-359, Jennifer and Brian Marsh, on behalf of Rebecca Riley and Zach McCullough, owners. This is 291 Varick Street, Block 12807, Lot 9, in the Van Voorst Park Historic District. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for interior renovations, front facade window and door replacements, rear facade alterations, and construction of a roof deck and bulkhead visible from the public right-of-way at 291 Varick Street, an altered contributing Italianate row house constructed circa 1870.
Okay, both Brian and Jen, we swear both of you in.
Yes. I'll go first. I'm Jen Marsh, by the way.
Okay, can you please raise your right hand? And do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the
I do.
truth? So help you God.
I
Thank
do.
you.
Mhm.
And then Brian, I believe, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. All set.
And just state and spell your names for the record, please.
It's Jennifer Marsh, Jennifer, Marsh, Marsh.
Brian Marsh, Brian Marsh.
All right, and staff notes that both Brian and Jennifer have been qualified in front of this board before. Do I need to promote anyone else for you guys, or are you two presenting?
Just us.
Just us.
Perfect. You guys should be good to go.
Okay.
Okay. Can we share?
Yes, dear. Share screen.
Okay. Can everyone see our A101?
Yes.
Okay. So we are at 291 Varick Street. We are doing from front facade work. We're doing rear facade work and interior renovation and a proposed roof bulkhead, roof deck, and green roof. So let's go to the first page. At the front, let's actually go to the next page because it's got kind of everything showing here on the front. So on the front elevation, we are doing window replacement within all the existing masonry openings. We are showing 2/2 to match the neighbor to the right-hand side. There are lots of 1/1s also in the block, but the homeowners would prefer to do 2/2, so that's what we're showing. We are replacing the front door as well, and that we're proposing it being the panels of them being full glass, and mimicking all the other doors in the paneling detail that would go around that glass, but they're looking to get as much light as they can in the front. So yeah, we're showing here what some of the neighbors have. They're kind of odd doors, some of the existing ones, in that they're panels within panels with like single pane glass that almost seems like it was retrofitted. But we would like to go to all glass similar to the neighbor to the left-hand side at 289, and then have them be full height as well. So that's kind of one area that we're working on. We have the windows, the doors, the front stoop. We're retaining, we're going to keep the railings that are there, that are the kind that are kind of set in the stringer. They're in the original photo. We would like to alter the bottom of the, right now there's kind of these bulbous rounded additions to it. We would like to actually do what the neighbor did at 289. We can show that photo later where they just kind of streamlined those. We can look at that on the front elevation at some point. Okay, we're gonna do it right now. So you get an idea of what that looks like. If it wasn't. This is the neighbor.
So this is
to
the
left.
streamlined edge.
And that way the gate rail can go right up to that, and not have to have kind of this jerry-rigged kind of railing that is attaching to the handrail. So that would be the only alteration to the stoop and rail.
Sorry, you can see
But
it.
otherwise it's
You can
kept.
see it there.
We are rebrownstoning the front to recreate what would be there. It's right now, it's kind of glommy looking. Brian, if you go to the next page. Okay.
So all the details are very kind of rounded over and not crisp from the years of them either painting the masonry. So all the details are all kind of not not very crisp and original.
The neighbor to the
looking.
left has a pretty good redone pediment and pilaster, so we would match those is the intent.
Where do you?
So the window replacements, they're simulated double hungs. They would be, we have the color up in the corner is I think we call it, the Sherwin-Williams Caviar. It's a soft black. We would do that for the cornice. Repainting of that as well. We have a lantern. It's a hanging lantern that's now, we would replace that with a new lantern. I believe it's on the last page. That's the smaller lantern would be put down below under the stoop. Right now they have an odd lamp post that we would remove that's like in the garden and instead put a lantern like pretty much everybody else has. So that's the front facade scope. The rear facade, we are maintaining the upper window openings on the top 2 floors.
Sorry.
We were gonna replace those with wood windows as well. The front windows are arch tops. The back windows are flat arched tops. I mean, the window itself is, the glazing is squared off, just as everyone else's on the back. We are putting in more glass at the parlor and lower level, incorporating a narrow balcony and spiral stair off of that. That's all within zoning. We aren't going for any variances to do that, so we're staying within our 30-foot setback. And we are planning to paint the back. Right now, the existing brick is painted. It's patchy. It's a little spalled in some places. So we've talked with our building scientist about what's the best product to use so that it can still breathe and be good for the brick. And at the same time, not take the paint, trying to be like getting rid of all the paint. That might hurt the brick. So that is the intention there. We've shown that color as alpine white, which is like a soft white. It's represented in the elevation. Let's see. That's about it for the back. So
just mention the balcony again one more time.
Okay, do you want to go to the section maybe for the balcony?
Sure.
So the balcony is with a cantilever. So we've got brackets that support it. Yeah, you can see in the building section the spiral stair off of it, and that's a fairly narrow balcony off of the back. Okay. Which, while we're here, we can look then at the bulkhead that leads to a green roof and deck. We met with Maggie on the site and did a mock-up of the heights because we were
Hold on a second. Hello, can you hear me?
We lost you.
I hear somebody, you're frozen up and I can tell you where the record ended.
Okay.
Sure.
The records, okay, here's where the record stopped. We met with Maggie on the site and did a mock-up of the heights because we were, and then you cut out.
Okay.
Perfect.
Pick it up from there.
Awesome. So if you look, yes, we met with Maggie on the site and we put up 2-bys to like see what the height would be. We can,
So
lay out the
you can see
section.
in that red square there, there's a tip of a 2x4 sticking up on the roof. And so that 2x4 represents this spot right here.
Well,
actually
it
12 inches higher.
So what we did was we determined what that height was and said, okay, if we come down a foot, we should be below any sight line. And so that's what we showed, that's what we now have in our design. And what we're showing with the sight line angled on drawing 6, that the intention is that the front of the bulkhead would not be visible from across the street on Varick. That the rear, we can't not see it from the rear, given what we would need for a stair
So here's
and railing.
here's the 2x4 that we were holding up on the roof, and that would represent this edge of the bulkhead, which would be this corner of the bulkhead.
So then we did a rendering to show how much, by using that 2x4 in our drawing, to see what you would see of the bulkhead
From standing on the street.
from standing on the street. And I mean, one thing I would note is that York Street, that things start to break down a little bit on that side of that length of York Street, because there's a big parking lot across the street and some bigger buildings. And I think we have a diagram of that, yes, on the number 3 map. Scroll a little bit.
Yep, trying.
He's trying to scroll. You can see the sight lines from York Street. So I took that little diagram of that triangle is from where that photo was taken. And that there's like a parking lot, and these are some bigger multi-housing buildings over there. And then there's some lower, later buildings at the other end of the street. So our feeling was that, okay, that we're at least starting to end up in a different kind of zone of where, and I know sometimes there's accommodation for that. If you're not in a perfectly historic area to be able to see it, that maybe that might, just wanted to bring that up, that's the case in our situation. But the bulkhead, our intention is that it would be, we would use as much green roof as we can. The homeowners want to have green growing up on it as well. If we want to look at the floor plan of the roof, we're trying to maximize the amount of green roof to help with runoff and just all the things that I know that we know that Jersey City is trying to do as well. So this would allow them to get up there and maintain the green roof. And obviously they're looking to have a little bit of deck space up there as well. So I think that's it.
I think we covered it. Yep.
Do any members of the commission have any questions?
Hi, this is Commissioner Pepin. The roof addition, is that visible from the public right away?
Yes, it's visible from York Street. So if you look at we're standing on the sidewalk of York Street closest to the back of the property.
But it's not visible from Varick.
Do any of the neighbors have any roof additions that are also visible or no?
No, there are no other roof additions at this time.
And what is the size of that roof addition? The width and length?
It's 17 feet, about 1 inch long, and 11 foot 1 inch wide.
And it's accommodating a room as well as access to the roof, correct? It has
That's correct.
creating an
Little small
office
space.
space. Mhm.
Again, what we would be allowed, and we're allowing them to at least still soften roof and maintain as much green roof as we can.
Do you mind zooming into the roof plan that you have up?
Yep. So we'll have green roofs with sedum and grasses on both sides, and then the edges of near the roof deck are larger planting areas along those edges. We have a landscape architect on board to specify all the plantings if we get there.
And what is the height of the bulkhead?
It's 8'2" on the front of it from the roof, from the surface of the roof. And on the back, it's 10'2".
That's
good.
That's just mainly to accommodate the headroom that we need just to get the stair up when we get to the top of the landing and to come out of the building.
And it ends at 10'2" because that happens to be like where the roof is getting lower, right? So we're taking it from a low point to a high point on the one side.
We're as tight as we can be here to keep the water from, coming into the building. And then, we have a little bit higher height because of the headroom that we need. And we've sloped the bulkhead roof down at the front because we don't need as much height on this side because of the way we're coming up the stair. And, it's minimal space up there for a place to sit and gather your thoughts.
On the front facade, are those energy efficient windows? You said they're simulated double hung windows, right?
Yeah, they're triple glazed, double hung, simulated double hung.
And they're operable just on the what would be the lower sash?
Yes.
So go back.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's an image of it, ones we've done
It's what
elsewhere.
we've done
And
them
it has
twice
a-
with you guys before.
Yeah, and it has a meeting rail that simulates or
Yeah.
simulated meeting rail.
Yep.
The one thing you mentioned, there's that at the bottom of the stoop, there are those large
These guys.
yeah. So that's because historically there were large newel posts at the bottom, and you can see them in the historic photograph. If you go to
On the neighbor.
On the neighbor, he has them.
on the neighbor, and your building would have had them as well, I'm sure, because that's what they were there for. So
the horse ate them. Sorry. Try to scroll over. I mean, it feels like it feels like there isn't a newel there, but I could be wrong.
Because it's it's those kinds that are in the stringer. We don't have the
heavy,
you wouldn't have those big balustrade metal.
I think your railings are probably changed at some point.
Yep.
So I think that points to evidence for that being there historically. So I mean, my thought is that we probably shouldn't allow the removal of that. Not that we necessarily are going to make you put that newel post back in, but the removal of that would probably preclude anyone ever putting that back and kind of removing that portion of the story of the building. So that's probably the one thing where I'm like, I don't know if that's really appropriate on this. The 2/2 windows seem fine to me, or the simulated windows. There is one building on this row, I think, that does have 2/2 windows.
Right. It's the one on the right has it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't think there's necessarily a problem with that. One thing that I like kind of wish you did on the left here was to show, in addition to the roof, I guess we can imagine though, is what the visibility of the enlarged openings is, but I guess we can kind of imagine it there just to the left of the garage and how much it would be right there. And below. But I think that's kind of in line with other enlarged openings that we've approved in the past.
Right. That particular house struggles because for some reason there was no center window.
Yeah.
So I don't really know why. And it doesn't look like it was put in, bricked over at one point. So anyway.
And the bulkhead, I guess you're calling it a bulkhead, but it's more than just a bulkhead. If there is it's stretching the definition of a bulkhead maybe. I'm struggling with that just a little bit, but I think generally it's kind of borderline for me. The visibility, I kind of wish it was a little bit shrunk down and minimized, but it is over the rear facade and it is kind of secondary to the row, and it's not the full width of the building. So I don't know. I think I'm generally okay with it, but we can have, I don't know if other commissioners want to jump in.
Well, I definitely have some reservations about the size of the bulkhead. When you look at it in the way it's presented in these drawings, it really is quite large and chunky. And I do have some reservations about being able to see it from the rear of the building. I know in a lot of cases we have approved those sky doors as access to get up on a roof, which do not show, but it also would eliminate them being able to put any kind of usable room space up there. So I do have some reservations. I'm thrilled that they're putting a green roof. I do have reservations about the amount of glass that will also be visible on the parlor level from the rear facade through the public right of way. And then my other questions go to the front of the building. Do you have the original front doors there now?
Yes. Well, we have what's there now, which
It's
is right here.
number 6.
Can you zoom in on that number 6 a little bit?
Yep,
because it's kind of
absolutely.
glarish. So there's just glass up at the top.
There's 2 glass panels here
up at the top.
at the top, and then all these other details are gone, whatever they were, similar to this maybe.
Yeah,
But-
most likely they were identical. You could see
Yeah.
from house to house, they typically did the same thing.
It's unusual because it's got like a big chunky molding and then these inlaid
Like
applied panels. And
Right.
then
applied panels.
so
and
it's a
then-
little
and then it's
tricky,
got
like
this-
how would we replicate this and construct it in a way that actually because obviously we want them to be
Yeah.
efficient doors, so we're going to be copying what we're creating. So
And what material will those doors be made of? And will you be just taking out what is that filled in part and just making it glass with the same?
We would be making them out of wood.
Mhm.
And they would be new, and they would be, they would be easily operable, because right now they're not easily operable. Like a child can't easily open these doors to get in and out the way they're,
So we would copy
But-
the intent is to copy the large chunky molding panel. So we would copy what's there.
Mhm.
And that would be all glass within that, but it would be all new and it would be wood, painted wood doors.
Painted wood.
Yeah.
And then what do you have for hardware? Because it looks like you have original hardware on those doors as well. What
have
is
not
proposed
really-
for that?
Well, typically when we do doors this tall and you try to make doors this tall today, you need more modern type hardware that has a 3-point locking system on it to keep them straight and from warping and twisting. And it also gives you another level of protection from somebody getting in. So that's typically what we see on these types of doors when we try to
But we can
reproduce them this
Do
tall.
you
I
have-
mean,
do you
there
have
are,
a visual example of that?
yeah, we could provide a spec on that. But there are, there's a couple of companies that integrate with a 3-point locking system that allow us to do a more kind of historic looking lock. So we
Like
can do
Rocky
that.
Mountain.
Yeah, like Rocky Mountain is one brand that
Has all sorts of
has different
abilities to-
I'm sorry.
details of it.
Can you guys just speak one at a time?
Yep. Sorry, she'll talk.
It's okay.
Sorry, I was just saying that Rocky Mountain Hardware happens to be one company that has multi-point locks, has lots of options for whether it's a knob to make it look like a knob like this with a keyhole, and that we could do our best to try to match what is there, but that will function and be secure. And And it comes in, they have a bajillion different finishes, and so they're very accommodating that way if we need to go that route.
And then the rest of the door surround, what will be happening with that?
We'd be restoring that, stripping the paint.
Yeah,
And
'cause I see it has some diamond moldings in the same place that they exist on the front doors as well.
yeah, those are in better shape. So we
Mhm.
feel like we can probably keep them and restore them and repair them from the, in terms of like energy efficiency, they don't impact the envelope of the building.
No, and then your windows that you were putting in 2/2, did I hear you say the division was simulated and not true?
It's a simulated double hung. So it looks like a traditional double hung. So we have them going on in a project right now on Barrow Street. And you can't, they look better than actually a double hung window.
And they are wood windows as well?
They're wood windows, yes.
Okay.
And they're actually, they have the thinner sight lines, like what a traditional real double hung window used to be. So they're better looking than most.
And then what is the brick mold detail that you are going to be using with those windows? Do we have?
I'm showing a round, so it'd be like the existing doors have the existing front door. If you look in the section here, has a round brick mold. So
Right
we
there.
would be doing that again
Okay.
on the window.
Yeah.
It's a beefy round.
Okay.
Very simple and clean.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes that detail, which is, in my opinion, very important,
Mhm.
gets lost to a flat
Right.
molding that has no profile on it at all, and that's certainly not attractive.
Yeah, we really like the round. We've done that several times, and it looks really great.
Okay, and then I just wanted to concur with Brian about the round things down at the bottom where large newel posts once were. Of course, when they closed in the sides of the steps, they just left those cement things because they obviously the posts were sitting on them at a much lower level. But when they had to raise up the sides, they just added on height to that round part that you see. And I kind of feel that at some point, maybe somebody will want to put historic railings back there. Maybe not this owner, maybe 50 years from now, somebody will want to put those railings back.
I'd be very interested in understanding it, and maybe Maggie might know because what I'm confused about, just because we want to be historically accurate, is that the way that those rounds, did you think they built up the round later? Because right now
Yes,
would be able to put a
definitely.
post on that.
Yeah, because they raised up the sides of the steps. If you look at the pit,
Mm-hmm.
the neighboring house, the steps are open
Mhm.
and they have the historic railing. So if you look at their newel post where it lands, you will see that it's sitting on a round cement brownstone because it was part of the top step. The
Mhm.
newel post sat on that first step there.
Right.
Right. So they just built up that step when they raised up the side of the porch, the steps there, to put those newer railings on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, we were just going by the
Yeah. So the original bottom part of that was the first step.
Right.
And the newel post sat on there.
That's right. But yeah, we were just using the 1938 map.
Yeah,
tax
I
card,
get that.
so, yep.
All right, that's all I have.
Where does that ground level exterior light go? Is that between the first window and then the stairs?
Yeah. Right about where that cursor is right there. Let me go to the other drawing. Sorry, I gotta zoom back out more. Right here.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see it on H1.1.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional commissioner questions?
I would, this is Commissioner Gucciardo. I would just want to comment a little further on the bulkhead, which really is no longer just a bulkhead and just access to the roof. Now it's become, a portion of a floor with living space on top of the building. And I can certainly see why the owners would want to do that. It's obviously gives them more living space. But I'll wait to hear from staff on comments about visible bulkheads from the public right of way. I'm trying to remember what we've done in the past, but it seems somewhat intrusive and could possibly be much smaller if it didn't incorporate a room. And I'd also like to hear from staff on creating additional enclosed living space above the 40 feet or 40 some odd feet of the height restriction. Otherwise, I think other commissioners addressed all the other issues I have in terms of the rear and front facades.
I have a quick question on the bulkhead. Can we zoom in a little bit on the rendering where you show it over the rear facade?
This guy?
The rendering of the view from
here?
York Street? Yeah.
That one.
Yep.
So is the idea I see it looks, different in the elevation drawings. Is that just like a steel post? And then is the glazing wrapping around the way it's shown in this mock-up here, or is that just?
Yeah, that's just a rendering where there is a post.
You'll see some materiality at that
You will
corner.
see some material in that
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah,
to
I
hold
do
it.
think that might change the sort of like reception to this, even though it's modern and it's visible, because it'll look more like a punched opening like you see on the backs. Right now, the way it's rendered, it just seems like a ribbon window turning a corner.
Yeah, no, there's definitely 5 to 8 inches of material there to
On each corner.
hold it together.
Or should we move to public comment?
Sure. Brian and Jen, does that conclude your testimony?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. If there are any members of the public in attendance who would like to speak regarding this application, please use the raised hand function at the bottom of your screen. You can press *9 on the phone if you're on the phone. All right, staff is seeing no hands raised. Would recommend a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion, Gordon.
Second, Amatuzzo.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So prior to bringing up the staff report, I did want to discuss some of the questions that Stephen had about that rooftop enclosure. And to do so, I'm going to, the roof deck / rooftop enclosure section of our ordinance is actually not within 371, it's within supplementary zoning. So I'm just going to pull that up on the screen just because, so we can all look at it together, because it's not something that we typically look at. Just drag this over so it's a little bit more clear. So number 7 here. So this is in 345-60 supplementary zoning. Requirements for roof structures as enclosed amenity spaces. So our zoning ordinance does define that small habitable structure area, or it can be habitable structure, but that's what I mean, as a enclosed amenity space. And in historic districts, they are defined as a maximum of 100 square feet. The way our zoning officer interprets that is that's just the amenity space. So the way the calculation for the amenity space is the total area of that bulkhead minus the stairs. So from what I looked at it, it looked as if that section was about 75 square feet. When you subtract the stairs, that's mental math. That wasn't, I didn't formally calculate that, but it did appear to be less than 100 square feet. You're permitted more when there's an elevator, but there's not an elevator up there. So that it's not considered an addition to height. It's not calculated in the overall height of the building the same way that the bulkhead is not calculated in the overall height of the building, as long as that space up at the top remains rather small.
Thanks for that clarification. That helps. Thank you.
I mean, it's an important clarification because a lot of the roof deck applications that we get as a commission really are just the bulkhead and the stair and maybe 10 square feet up at the top for a landing. So this is a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. So I felt it needed some clarification there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the staff report for this application. So staff takes no exception to the interior renovations, the front facade alterations as they've been explained, and the alterations to the rear facade, although you will be able to see some of the fenestration changes at the parlor level. At this point in time, it is pretty typical, specifically of that parlor level, for those alterations to be made. When you get above the parlor level, they become less common, but parlor level changes like that and window fenestration are pretty common. However, they are something that, because they're visible, the commission would have to approve. So that's never something we would approve at a staff level, even if they didn't have the roof deck. A change like that would be coming towards you guys. We don't think any of those are going to have a adverse effect on the historic property itself or on Van Voorst Park as a whole. So the rub here is the roof deck bulkhead enclosure. So I wrote in the staff report that it's slightly visible from the public right of way, and I'm happy that Jen and Brian corrected me on that. It is right now, it is estimated that it won't be visible. Obviously, there's significantly more of an impact and adverse effects if it's visible from the front facade rather than the rear facade. So if this were to be approved, we would add a condition that it's not visible from the front facade specifically. But we do, when we review roof decks and rooftop enclosures like this, even though our zoning ordinance defines them as enclosed amenity spaces, we do still view it as a rooftop addition. And that's not just because of the size of the bulkhead. Any usable space on top of a roof, whether it is a deck or a staircase to a sky door with 2 square feet of space, we view it as a rooftop addition. And our zoning ordinance specifically states that rooftop additions should not be visible from a public thoroughfare or right of way. So while it is not visible from the front, it's substantially visible from the back. However, it was mentioned that it's not visible from the back within an area within a historic district. And that's kind of up for the commission to decide if being able to view a roof deck or a substantial rooftop enclosure like that from outside of the historic district is an adverse effect or not on both the resource and the district. So if the commission would be looking to deny the application based on the fact that the roof deck is visible, which if the commission were to do that, that would be the only recommendation for staff, is if you're going to deny it, it would be that would be what we would recommend that you cite. Alternatively, if the commission finds that it being visible, but it being visible from a vantage point outside of a historic district is not an adverse effect, we did provide conditions in which the commission could approve it under, and I also took notes as people were talking on additional things we could add to that if the commission wanted to go that way. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Maggie, I know Commissioner Amatuzzo had asked the applicant some questions about the front door, and I was just wondering if you could speak specifically about the appropriateness of the door choice.
Well, the recommendation for staff is always to, if you have historic fabric, you keep the historic fabric. I was able to, dredge up one of the historic photos, and the door that they're looking to mimic, while we can't tell the door, we don't have the more clear version of the 1938 for this property, but we do have the more clear version of the door that they are, with the glazing that they're looking to, I'll use the word mimic. And you can see here, it is visible on the 1938 tax photograph. So having that much glazing is not unprecedented. However, if they have the historic door there, then, and there, it seems like we were open to keeping the historic door with some alterations. So we would obviously be happy with that.
Well, that's extremely helpful. Thank you. And the applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard them say was that it was a problem with the door not being operable as intended, that it's difficult to open and close. I don't know if that's something that could be repaired. Is that possible?
Typically when we see these kind of doors, and once you start to unravel them a little bit, you find that they're being held together by paint and, you know, patchwork, and typically it's not realistic to, you know, save them and that they're going to hold up for a long time. So typically we've tried in the past to save doors like that, and at the end of the day we usually have to start over because there's just so much wood that's been kind of chopped up and missing and falling apart. So, but I mean, we've tried in the past, not to say that we can't try again, but it seems to me like it's such a big door that it needs to maybe start over.
Well, that may well be. So if the commission were prepared to approve the application, I think I would like to make at least some effort to salvage the door before we throw it out.
I mean, one of the goals of the project is to be really energy efficient with the house. So keeping the door is almost impossible because it's so leaky. So that's another drawback to why we can't really save the door. So, but we can
try.
What's that?
But can we try?
Yeah, you can try. I mean, all we're doing is we're just throwing money at it. So,
I mean, we totally are open to trying. Actually, the homeowner would probably love to keep the doors. Like, so, I mean, it's not, they're actually not against it.
Okay.
We have just experienced, and we've looked at these doors and they are a real problem. So we kind of are anticipating what we're going to find once we start messing with them, but we are definitely open to, and then we'll just have to come up with some ways to make them more air sealed and energy efficient as well, or a second door or something.
Right.
Okay. So that being said, I guess I would want to clarify what that means as far as the doors that are there, and that it's just the glass that's at the top and it's just totally intact the way it is, where it has the weird panels and whatnot. So but if we are going to be needing to try to salvage what is there and just make it better, are we, I guess we are keeping it really intact the way it is with just the glass at the top.
If that's the historic fabric, I would think so.
I guess what's confusing is that they're not all the same, all the one, like they're, I don't know if that was the original, the glass at the top.
Well, that's a question that I have. My question is, are we looking at the original doors to the building and the original configuration? Or are we looking at something that has, evolved over time? So can anyone say what we're looking at here? Maggie, have you been out there to take a look?
I have.
And is it an original door?
The doors are certainly old. They match an adjacent property. We do not have for some reason either the tax office skipped it or the surveyor skipped it. I don't have a 38 photo for this property aside from the one that's on there where you cannot see the doors. So making an exact determination as to if they are the original doors, it's never going to be an exact science in this particular case.
Right.
But they're old. They're I did not inspect the wood grain on them, but I would imagine that they are the typical old growth grain that you would say. And they match one of the properties, one of the other properties on the row. So
I would clarify, when you say they match, the other property has glass that goes down farther.
Yeah.
yes,
I don't know which was which, you know.
And there's there's the diamond pattern that matches at the same location in the door surround. So I think that points to some originality there, the fact that matches. Personally, I would be fine if the doors can't be reused, if they were matching something like the neighbor where there is glass up to like the top 2/3, and then you have that diamond pattern that matches the neighbor. Something like that I think would be appropriate for me personally.
The only other comment I would want to make is there's been a lot of reference to what's happening on other buildings in the row. And I'm always very cautious about applicants who say, well, it's happening over there. Unless that's qualified with that's an original door or original window or original construction, there's no point in referencing and saying, hey, it's happening over there, so we should be able to do it over here. So I would just recommend, when I'm speaking to the architects now, when you're referencing other buildings, we'd have to have clarification that those are appropriate doors, windows, railings, whatever. Otherwise, it doesn't help us make a decision that you should do it on this particular property.
there any other comments, questions? How are we on the bulkhead?
You kind of left us to make that decision, Maggie.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason that I did that is the recommendation from staff is that it is up to the commission to assess that.
Okay.
It is something, and not to signal you, Stephen, but it is something that repeatedly comes up, right? The visibility of these tiny bits and corners of roof decks and railings, and does that impact this? Does that impact that? Well, we have a question in front of us. We can see this rather substantial bulkhead, but when you see it, you are not within the historic district.
Right.
If you're not within the, like, does that, I'm not going to call it an imaginary boundary, but that boundary does not exist for anyone other than maybe me, who knows the exact lot where the boundary is, right? Is that visibility an adverse effect on the historic district?
And that becomes a that becomes subjective, right? Because there's no ordinance that says one way or the other, the answer to that question.
Well, it's subjective in the sense that it's up to the commission to define that.
Right.
And the other wrinkle is that it's an enclosed amenity space, not a bulkhead.
True. I mean, we could say, ask them to eliminate the amenity space and just have a bulkhead. That would make it less visible and still give them access to the roof. To me, I don't think it makes a difference whether, what was that?
Not to cut you off, it wouldn't make it less visible, it would just make it less visible. Like, it would make it skinnier, but you would still be able to see.
Skinnier, but you'd still see it.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes a difference whether or not you're standing in the district or not. I don't think it makes a difference at all. One of the things that I've been thinking about, though, is that, like, does this kind of feel kind of disconnected from the rest of the building, and kind of in a good way? Walking around now, when you're standing at many vantage points in historic districts, you see giant towers going up all across town.
It's true.
The other day I'm in Van Voorst Park, and I'm looking south, and I can see all these new buildings in Liberty Harbor North going up above this pristine row of buildings on York Street. and, you know, kind of thinking, what's this one, which I think is rather well designed, bulkhead amenity space, is that really going to make a huge difference here if it's visible? I really don't think so. In this case, it's not visible over the primary facade. I think that's the more important facade. I think that's the most important thing to stick to, and to hold that line, to not let things be visible over primary facades on buildings. To me, I think I can support this in its current form. But I can understand if people didn't. But I think if you're saying, well, you know, we're not standing in the historic district, I don't think that's a line we want to. I think that's a weak way out of this, and you should either say I'm okay with this or I'm not.
Mhm.
And I think I'm okay with this.
So, well, I mean, I would just say that the fact that, you know, all these tall buildings are going up all around, to my mind, makes the work that we're doing safeguarding these areas more important because of the scarcity. It distinguishes them from that surrounding urban sprawl. But I mean, my feeling is that I agree with you, Brian, that that the visibility from a secondary facade makes this, you know, we've accepted that in the past. I know we've approved bulkheads that are visible from the rear and the side. But where I do have some concern is about it being an enclosed amenity space. And to me, that feels a little bit greedy. You know, I know it's not maybe a huge impact because it'll still be visible if it were solely a bulkhead, but I would feel more comfortable with that personally, as opposed to what they've proposed.
Then the question for that and I kind of was going there too. I'd agree with you, but then the question is, well, is there going to be a wind? I actually think part of this is that it is well designed, which I appreciate from the architect. And if there's no amenity space and it's just a bulkhead, I think the architects could correct me if I'm wrong, but that may then eliminate the need for a window as part of it. And we might be looking at something a little bit differently. You know, it might just be, I'm not even sure what the clad material is off the top of my head, but you know, if we're looking at just the clad bulkhead, are we looking at it differently then too, you know?
Sure. Yeah, we would be. I mean,
We often look at stair bulkheads and are not happy with them. You know, we see a lot of them and you clearly know it's a stair going to the roof, but it's sloped and it's got siding on it. And so when the clients wanted to go and get the 100 square feet of amenity that is allowable by the historic, we're like, okay, well, let's design that and see if we can. And ultimately, I feel like we did like it better than this skinny kind of thing sticking up there. So, but
right,
we'd have to look at it.
I think the commission has to decide if we're going to accept the structure, then there are ways to minimize its visibility. We've done that in the past with the color of the material. We've often asked them to be clad in something light material to blend in with the sky, so it's not obtrusive on top of the building. We've asked for other things to try and minimize its effect. But I think first we have to decide if it's acceptable, right? I think that's number one. Then we can talk about ways to mitigate it if we're going to accept it.
yeah. I mean, the one mitigation we're thinking of is the fact that it's going to have greenery and landscape around it. And, you know, to me, that just became even a more important detail that everybody needs to start contributing to it based on the last storm that we all went through. And, you know, we're not going to have a historic district if we don't do something, and everyone's got to do it, because it's like everybody flooded and these green roofs are, you know, I mean, if one person does it, it's not going to impact. But if everybody starts to, you know, design their houses in such a way, it will start to have an impact. So having that amenity space will allow people to have these types of roofs, maintain these types of roofs, and be able to appreciate those roofs. Otherwise, it's just, you know, a stair to a roof that, you know, nobody goes up to and maintains and keeps it, you know, actually working and functioning. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the homeowners saw it that way, that it was this kind of these two things coming together, the green roof and this space up there to kind of be using them together. And I do think our position on it was, because we tend to always do things very carefully and not, because we don't like a lot of the bulkheads that we see, that we kind of do feel like there needs to be a bit of a direction, because our roof water flooded our basement. So these are kind of the things that I think hopefully we can start having everybody think about, that there's kind of a symbiotic relationship between how we're going to treat these roofs and how we choose to utilize them.
Is it possible for you to minimize the size of it? I don't quite understand why it needs to be 10 feet high in order for you to get access out of that bulkhead. For one thing, maybe you could minimize the height. Maybe you could make some recommendations on the exterior finish. Some things that would make it more acceptable.
I'm also wondering if, sorry to interrupt.
No, please. Go ahead.
You know, we're having this debate about amenity space versus bulkhead. And I think one of the things that maybe is making it read less as a bulkhead is the window facing the back as like a amenity space. And maybe it's treated where it's visible from the street as more of a bulkhead. Does that make a difference to any?
sorry, you were freezing up on your comments on our end.
Oh, I guess what I was just saying is that, you know, we've been having this discussion about amenity space versus bulkhead. And if, you know, when I saw the rendering of the bulkhead over the rear facade, I'm wondering if it's treated more as a bulkhead where it's visible from the street. Does that make it easier for some of the commissioners to get on board?
I think I'd rather have a window instead of a brick wall or whatever other kind of solid cladding at the top of this building.
And to answer you, Stephen, I mean, we totally can talk about what it wants to be. I mean, we were a little bit relying on this idea of growing green. Obviously, I get that that is a ephemeral thing that doesn't always get maintained. So we don't want to rely on that.
Almost never.
That right. That's not what we're not gonna rely on that. But I mean, there would be conversations about what could be less visible. I think the reality is though, is it's there. No matter if it's a cloudy day, then it wants to be gray. If it's a sunny day, then it wants to be blue. So I think it has to be just accepted of like, is it attractive, right? Is it feel appealing? You know, I think it goes to the conversation of when like something well designed that maybe is a little different than the fabric, is that a good thing or is that not? So I think we're presenting it that way. We're not trying to say it's like a little, you know, it's a traditional thing up here. So I just think we should be honest about what it wants to be, and we would approach it as that we want it to be like a beautiful little box up there. And if it got skinny and sloped roofed, and it would definitely look like a lot of the other siding stair things that we see all over in Hoboken that drive us nuts. So it was definitely intentional in kind of the form that we created.
Understood.
I'm gonna echo Brian's comments about it being invisible from the public right-of-way on the primary facade. I would point to, let's say, 4 or 5 different applications that we approved for bulkheads that were visible from secondary facades or from oblique angles. One of them was the townhouse that was visible beyond Seatown, if commissioners recall that one. Also, it goes back maybe over 10 years, maybe 15 years ago. Commissioner Gucciardo might remember, on Van Voorst Park, on the north side of Van Voorst Park, there was a house that wanted a bulkhead for a rooftop deck, and we permitted it even though it was visible from inside the park. And that is within the historic district, and that was over the primary facade. Also on Bright Street, the firehouse on Bright Street had an addition that was not visible from across the street, but you could walk across not just Bright Street, but also across Grand Street, which would be outside of the district, and we permitted that addition. Now, we mitigated that because they did so much work on that firehouse, but it was a large addition, rooftop, visible from the public right of way from the primary facade. Also, St. Bridget's Convent there was a visible bulkhead and back addition that was visible from the public right of way from a secondary facade from behind the building, as you might recall. And there's multiple others. Those are just ones that I just came up with while we were sitting here talking. I would say that, so because of that, and because historically there are bulkheads on top of historic buildings, that as a rooftop appurtenance, it wouldn't be necessarily not appropriate as long as it's not visible from the primary facade in the public right of way, and the applicant does their very best to make sure that it's minimally visible from that secondary facade. So I agree with Chairman Blasek on that.
I would concur with both Chairman Sandkamp, Vice Chair Sandkamp, and Chair Blazak. I am at this point ready to approve this application. I just feel like the green roof really makes up for what little of the bulkhead we are going to see from a non-historic point of view.
I'm having a hard time understanding you. There's some kind of background noise. I don't know where that's coming from.
I think
Not sure what it is, but if everyone else can mute themselves, that's when they're not talking.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I was saying is I have no issue with the bulkhead visible from a secondary or third, not even a view from the district, given that it is going to have a green roof up there. I'm willing to overlook whatever is showing from a non-public right of way and not in the historic district. So I'm pretty much ready to move forward with this application and approve it and do what we need to do to get them going.
All right, it sounds like I think we have enough to support an approval here. Staff comments were now so long ago that I don't know if I remember what the conditions of approval were, if we had.
Well, if it makes you feel better, you're not going insane, because I didn't even read them into the record because I didn't know the feel of the commission if we were going to do that. So, all right. Before I pull up the staff report and read the conditions that were proposed in the staff report, I did work out some phrasing regarding the front door. And that is, the applicant shall make every effort to retain and reuse the existing front doors, and that the applicant shall work with HPC staff and reflect those changes in the construction documents. So that it gives us a little bit of time to figure out if we can reuse the doors, make the changes that were requested by the commission or suggested by the commission in terms of the change in glazing. And then if we exhaust all resources and cannot reuse the doors, then we'll work with the applicant on shop drawings and appropriate alterations to that door, to new doors. Okay. And then in the staff report, we have more or less our standard conditions. So yeah, we do actually, so we have one in here for shop drawings for the new front doors. So I'm just gonna keep that in there. But I'll make a note in the certificate of appropriateness that the retain and reuse overrides shop drawings for new front doors. And then other than that, Those are our standard conditions for the application. Did I miss any other requested conditions as we were all talking?
Yes, Maggie, the two round things at the base of the steps where
Okay.
the newel posts used to sit.
Retain the flare, the
Yes.
bottom step flares term?
Yeah. Retain the drums at the bottom of the steps.
Thank you. Okay. Got it. Great. Were there any other requested conditions for this application?
No.
Cool. Brian and Jen, does your client accept the conditions as read into the record and on the staff report?
I think you're trying to talk, but you're muted.
Yes.
Sure, we're
Let's
good.
do thumbs.
Okay. Well, in that case, the recommendation from staff is to approve the certificate of appropriateness with conditions.
Make a motion to approve with conditions.
Second.
I think I got Commissioner
Kelly
Lewis.
have a.
Yep. All right, we'll move to a roll call vote. Let's do Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
I'm trying to jump around here. Commissioner Gordon.
I'm gonna vote nay.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say that there's no entitlement to a roof deck that is visible from a public right of way. As Vice Chairman Sandkamp summarized in detail, we have permitted roof decks that were minimally visible from oblique angles, but that I think stems from our desire to be reasonable and not unnecessarily prevent homeowners from enjoying the use of their property. And the homeowner, for their part, has to take steps to minimize the visibility of the roof deck and bulkhead. And to my mind, an enclosed amenity space is not consistent with that obligation. And I certainly appreciate the green roof, but I can't agree to the Faustian bargain that Commissioner Amatuzzo described. So I'm going to cite section 345-71 L3B3 for rooftop additions.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Peppin.
Yay.
Okay, Commissioner Guardrail. You're muted, Stephen.
Muted.
Please skip me, please.
Okay.
Come back to me.
Commissioner Amatuzzo.
Aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
All right, Stephen, I gotta come back to you.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Vice Chairman Sandkamp
Aye.
and Chairman Blazak.
Aye.
Okay, there are seven. Wait, I'm sorry, did I count one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, okay. There are 7 votes in favor. There are 2 against, no abstentions. The certificate of appropriateness is granted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Stephen, you could have voted. You
Thank
could
you.
have had a protest nay if you wanted.
Yes, I know that, but this seems to be an ongoing dilemma for me with our applications these days. So I'm going to have a drink and think about all this.
Not while you're currently in the middle of the meeting.
Not while I'm in the meeting.
At a different time. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, we have one more case before we start.
All right, we had 9E, and hopefully we will get through this quickly. This is case H21-361, Patrick Conlon Esquire on behalf of Nicholas Schultz and Amy, and I apologize if I mispronounce it, Sangdamrong owners. This is 250 Barrow Street, block 14106, lot 43 in the Van Voorst Park Historic District. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the existing rear yard shed and construction of a rear yard deck and rear yard landscaping. This is a recommendation to the Jersey City Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Okay, Elizabeth, we just need to swear you in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
And then, read your name into the record and spell it for us, please.
Sure, it's Lisbeth Mendizabal. It's Lisbethmendizabal.
Great. And staff notes that she's been previously qualified in front of this board before. Patrick, you are good to go whenever you're ready.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for sticking around for this last project. So I'm Patrick Conlon from Connell Foley on behalf of the applicant who owns this building. So it's a 2-family home. It's a 4-story building, and you've actually seen this building before. You approved a certificate of no effect, I believe, back in March for rooftop bulkhead and deck. So today we are back before you. We are proposing to remove a shed in the rear yard of this property to replace the backyard, which is currently concrete, with some landscaping, and to install a roof deck. The roof deck is kind of the big ticket item, I guess. We are matching the roof deck with the adjacent property. It has a similar roof deck. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a roof deck. It is a backyard patio. The roof deck conversation from the previous application.
It's also 10:15, so.
It's on my mind. Yeah, that also. So it's going to, the deck will line up with the neighboring building, which also has a deck. That's 252 Barrow Street. And then the neighbor on the other side, which is 248 Barrow Street, they added a rear yard extension to their property. And so that extends further into the rear yard than our roof deck. As part of this application, we are seeking 1 variance for rear yard setback. So we'll have to go to the zoning board after this, obviously, to get that approved. I'll just note that it is an undersized lot. This lot is only 66 feet deep, and a standard lot in, a standard 2-family home would have a 100-foot depth. So we were limited a little bit in how much of a setback we could provide. So I've got 1 witness here. Elizabeth is our architect. She's going to walk you through. I would just say that, we feel generally this is not very visible from the right of way. With that, I will pass the mic over to Elizabeth, who is really the star of the show.
Hi, everybody. It's been a long night, so I'm going to try to make it short and sweet. It's not that different from the previous proposal of an extension for a deck in an undersized lot. So I'm going to share my screen.
You should be able to.
Okay. Just going to find the right screen. I have too many things open. I'm still not seeing it. I'm sorry.
Take your time. I also have them here too, if you need me to.
I'm looking through all, oh, here. I have too many windows open. I apologize. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to skip over to T2, which shows the actual composition of the lots. So this is a block diagram that we did. This is the existing diagram showing the this is the project. It's 250 Barrow, and as Patrick was saying, 248 Barrow is on this side. And this is a project that has already done an extension to the back, which is much, much further when we're proposing. And 252 Barrow is as similar in depth to our project. And they have an existing deck, which is the one I'm hovering over right now. And this is our client's project. So they have this 3-story building here. And this is a 1-story addition that was done years ago. And what they are looking to do is an extension similar to what 252 has back here, which is a deck over like a storage below. And what we want to propose in return is removing this pretty large, awful looking deck, which actually is touching the property line in the back on the side. It's pretty visible from the back. So this is a proposed block diagram. If you can see, we're basically aligning the 2 decks. And I'm going to show you a photo later on. So here's the existing property. plan showing the one-story shed back here, a concrete planter, and the rest of the flooring in here is a paved yard, so it's considered an impervious surface, and this is a non-compliant stair to the yard. So what we're proposing is to just remove everything back here, including the one-story shed, and creating a new deck that is going to align with a neighbor's deck, same height and everything. And underneath it, we would have storage that would be a little bit smaller than what they're losing with the shed, but at least it would provide some sort of usage for it. And the idea also, and this is going back to what the previous architects were talking about, we have such issues in Jersey City with rain, with water runoff. And so what we want to do is create a pervious surface in the backyard so that they're going to have landscaping and obviously help with the situation. Let me see, I'm going to jump back here. So this is existing condition. It's just stuff. It's actually an old photo because it's not showing 248 Barrow, which actually extends past this tree here. And it's a full 4-story addition back here. And this is my client's property. And you can see the parlor floor addition that was built a few years ago. And this is what we're proposing. Basically the same design, same length of a deck with storage below. Pretty much the consistency of the design and the proposal. And this is why we're seeking a variance, because we're going from having like, I guess there was no setback back here to a 17-foot setback, which is less than the 30-foot required. But again, they're non-conforming lot is kind of compromised in itself. Here's a view for the elevation showing the existing deck and how bulky and big it is, the non-compliant stairs. And what we would be doing is propose this deck with a rail system for the handrails, and the addition below would be clad with a composite material, TimberTech mahogany, just kind of keep it very natural looking, and just one sconce that is going to be a downcast light back here, and just 2 small windows that are awning windows by Marvin that would just basically match the rest of the building's windows in black frame, and it's just to provide some lighting for the storage below. And here's just a section showing the existing shed and what we're proposing as the addition back here, which seems much less obtrusive. So in general, we just feel that this proposal of the deck and yard will be in keeping with the neighborhood buildings, and it's definitely going to be an improvement to the property. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Elizabeth, would you mind just going over what the proposed lot coverage is and compare that to the existing lot coverage? I just want to make sure that we make
Sure. So the existing building coverage for the property is 68%, and we're actually decreasing by to 67. It's not a huge decrease, but at least it's going to be less than what's existing.
And the lot coverage?
Sorry, that would currently, because of the paved yard and everything, right now the lot coverage is 100%, and we'll be lowering it to 74% because of the landscape yard.
Do you have any drawings of the landscaping you're doing in the yard?
Well, currently we have just basically, let me see if I can go back here. So when we're proposing that, they wanted something that was low maintenance. So we're looking at a turf surface that is pervious, considered pervious, and some local plantings such as lavender, daylilies, sage, and some of the plantings that they currently have right now. They're trying to salvage those and replant them on this new planter.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? Going once. All right, everyone looks pretty good on this, I think. Brian?
Yeah.
All right, sorry, you were just unmuted. All right, well, in that case, Patrick and Elizabeth, does that conclude your testimony?
Yes.
Yep, that's all we've got for you.
Great. All right, so in that case, we'll move on to public comment. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak regarding this application, please use the raise hand function or press *9 if you're on the phone. Okay, staff is seeing none and would recommend a motion to open and close public comment.
Motion, Sandcamp.
Second, Peppin.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we'll move.
I'm sorry, who is the motion and second to? I can't really see.
Sandcamp was the
Thanks.
motion.
Okay,
Peppin was second.
Pepin, got it.
Okay. So we will move to staff comment. Like usual, I will go right to staff recommendations and comments. So staff thinks that the proposed alterations to the rear and the rear yard deck are consistent with our ordinance and the Secretary of the Interior standards. It generally follows the existing block paradigm. And the requested variants don't appear to have an adverse effect on the resource. If anything, it makes the rear yard setback, which does not conform, but it makes it better. We're going from 0 to 17, so it's progress in the right direction. So we do recommend that the commission approve a certificate of appropriateness and make a recommendation for approval to the zoning board with the following conditions. There are standard conditions for something like this, so all materials need to come to HPC staff prior to construction documents. Planting, landscaping conforms, detail specs, all of it, our normal stuff. Are there any questions for staff?
I may have missed it, but is there a line of sight drawing or something to tell us what is actually visible from the public right of way?
You know, you didn't miss it. I actually, I forgot to mention it. It's actually here on the block diagram. I think you can probably see. I'm going to try to blow it up a little bit.
You're not sharing your screen anymore.
I'm sorry?
You're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oh, I'm not. I'm sorry. Let me share it again.
Yeah, I kicked you off that.
Oh, no. It's too late. All right. Here. Can you see it now? So the only angle of vision that you would have is from York Street. And if it's okay, I want to share the photo that we submitted for our previous filing for the other additions the changes that we're doing to the back. So yeah, this is a view from York Street, and this is the 248 barrel that I was saying that it's a further extension than ours. This is the roof of my client's extension. This is their parlor floor. So essentially the railing for their deck would be down here somewhere, and the deck would probably be down here. You can't even see the neighbor's deck either. And this is the only area that you can possibly see it. This is from York Street.
Do we need to mark this into evidence?
Yeah, yes, you beat me to it. Let's just go ahead and
part of our submission.
Yeah, let's just mark this as A1, and it's the plan set from the roof deck COA.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any questions? All right, hearing none. The recommendation from staff is to approve the certificate of appropriateness with the conditions read into the record, and make a recommendation for approval to the zoning board.
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions set forth by staff. Sandcamp.
Second, Gordon.
Okay. Patrick, does your client accept the conditions?
Yes, we reviewed them and they're acceptable.
Great. We'll move to a roll call vote. Commissioner Amatuza.
Aye.
Commissioner Gucciardo. Stephen.
Sorry, aye.
Commissioner Gunther.
Aye.
Commissioner Gordon.
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Commissioner Pappen.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandcamp.
Aye.
And Chairman Blazak.
Aye.
All right, there are 8 votes in favor, none against. The certificate of appropriateness is approved, and recommendation to the planning board, zoning board is approved.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for sticking around, commissioners.
You're welcome.
And Maggie and court reporter.
No problem. All right, good night, guys.
Good night.
So withdraw that. Okay, so a little bit left of the agenda. just pull it up so I don't forget anything because I'm sure
Table.
that-
We have table cases. Any update on the table cases? I'm guessing not.
No, definitely not. We have no resolutions to introduce or memorialize or discuss. I do not believe we need an executive session, which just leaves adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
10:30 p.m. So the meeting has ended.
Thank you all.